the inflationary losses since those limits were first set?
So state.
I thank the honourable lady for her question. The UK Government is providing the Welsh Government with nearly £6 billion in additional spending power over the spending review period as a result of changes to the fiscal framework, additional funding through Barnett and the largest settlement in devolution history. We are righting the injustice of how Wales has been funded and delivering on our manifesto commitment to update the fiscal framework. Crucially, these changes mean that the Welsh Government will be able to invest more funding in our hospitals, schools and other public services.
Ruth Jones, Chair of the Select Committee.
The Welsh compound semiconductor cluster in my constituency is a real Welsh success story in terms of this year's budget. It's attracted over £1 billion worth of investment over the last decade, supporting almost 3,000 jobs, with plans to create 1,000 more well on the way. So what conversations is the Secretary of State having with the UK and Welsh Government colleagues to ensure that the Welsh semiconductor cluster continues to grow and create more well-paid jobs across South Wales?
Secretary of State.
My honourable friend has rightly championed the Welsh compound semiconductor cluster from the minute she arrived in this place, and I've seen its success for myself on a number of visits there. In last week's budget, the Chancellor announced £10 million for semiconductor activities in South Wales. This funding will focus on the technologies central and critical to AI and data centres to support innovation, strengthen supply chains and develop the skills needed for future growth. And just 2 weeks ago, I was with the Science Secretary at Cardiff University, a key partner with the cluster, to announce the South Wales AI Growth Zone, which will create more than 5,000 new jobs for local communities, including in her own constituency.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
We all know why the Chancellor went to Wales on Monday. She was seeking to avoid scrutiny over a self-inflicted controversy, but it doesn't end there. There's been criticism of the Chancellor's claim that additional funding for Scotland was given because, and I quote, because Anas Sarwar asked us to. There was no mention of the First Minister, Leonard Morgan. Now, there's a mechanism for Barnett funding. It's not a gift. Will the Secretary of State therefore commit to honesty over how Wales is funded rather than insulting our intelligence?
I'm surprised at the right honourable lady's tone. Whilst this Labour government makes record investment in Wales, Plaid has the same old stuck record in response. Miserable grievance politics. They really are the Victor Meldrew of Welsh politics, Mr Speaker, and they still haven't explained which taxes they would raise, which public services they would cut to pay for their disastrous independence plan that will cost every single person in Wales £7,000 a year, every single year.
Saville-Roberts.
Desperate, Mr Speaker, and we all know that the Secretary of State has been using figures which you can't extrapolate what independence will do from them. And I wish that she would keep up, because Plaid Cymru are actually talking with Labour in Cardiff about how to improve public services in the NHS. But the people of Wales, of course, they want facts, not spin. So a year after the announcement of inheritance tax changes, the UK Government has still failed to release data on the impact on family businesses and farms in Wales. She knows the cross-party Welsh Affairs Committee has called for the changes to be delayed until a full Wales-specific impact assessment is published. What has the Government got to hide?
The Government has absolutely nothing to hide.
Right, we come to Cerebral.
Question number three, Mr Speaker, then. Two.
Sorry? Gursnell, sorry. Sorry, Gursnell.
Question number 2, Mr Speaker.
Minister, sorry, my fault.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. With your permission, I will answer questions 2, 4, 6 and 9 together. Growth is the #1 mission of this government. We are creating tens of thousands of jobs in every corner of Wales, and this includes billions of pounds of investment into nuclear power in Anglesey, 2 AI growth zones, a defence growth deal, 2 free ports and 2 investment zones, which will deliver further economic growth to Wales.
Gursnell.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Because of decisions of the UK Labour government, minimum and living wage will increase, boosting wages for thousands of workers across this country, including 160,000 people in Wales. Could the Secretary of State set out what impact she thinks this critical announcement will have on the economy and peoples of Wales?
So State.
Can I thank my honourable friend for his question? From April, a full-time worker on the national living wage will see their annual pay rise by £900. That's on top of the £1,400 increase that we announced in the previous budget. And 18 to 20-year-olds working full-time on the national minimum wage will get an annual increase of £1,500, which, when added to last year's increase of £2,500, means £4,000 extra a year. This Labour government is supporting the lowest paid workers across the country, with 2.7 million workers, including in Stoke-on-Trent Central, Cardiff East and every other constituency directly benefiting.
Speaker, I was pleased to see Conway selected for this UK government's Pride in Place programme recently, alongside existing funds for Rhyl and Wrexham. Given the North West's strong economic and family ties to North Wales, I was also proud to secure £20 million for Rochdale in Pride in Place programme. Can the Secretary of State update the House on the difference these growth funds and other funds will make to economic development in the region?
So State.
Mr Speaker, the introduction of the Pride in Place programme meant good news for Rochdale and good news for Wales too. So a total now of 14 communities across Wales are each benefiting from £20 million long-term investment to enable the changes that they want to see in their neighbourhoods. This hyperlocal programme will benefit those areas that are doubly disadvantaged, both by the highest deprivation levels and weakest social infrastructure. This is about investing for the long term, creating safer, stronger and more resilient communities with the facilities and infrastructure they need to thrive.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's been a momentous 2 weeks for my Welsh colleagues, with 2 new AI growth zones in both North and South Wales, a fleet of small modular reactors, billions of pounds of investment and 11,000 new jobs. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that this shows that this Labour government is determined to ensure there will be growth across the UK, including in Wales?
So State.
Can I thank my honourable friend for his question? He's absolutely right. This Labour government has backed Welsh business and economic growth since day one, and the results speak for themselves. New nuclear at Wilver, the 2 new AI growth zones, means well over 11,500 new jobs. Add to that the best inward investment results for years, 30% increase in jobs created, 23% increase for projects landed, more jobs, wages rising faster than inflation, more money in the pockets of people across Wales.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. The UK and Welsh governments are rightly prioritising the next generation through apprenticeships and engineering opportunities linked to the Welver SMR project. Does my right honourable friend agree that young people in Scotland deserve access to the same world-class training pathways as those in Wales? And will she work with colleagues to ensure that Scottish businesses can participate fully in the UK-wide nuclear skills pipeline, despite the ideological opposition from the SNP, which prevents similar investments being realised in Scotland?
He's absolutely right to raise this ideology of the nationalists. Nationalists in Scotland turn their back on nuclear jobs for Scots, and nationalists in Wales are desperately trying to hide the cavernous split in their party on whether they support new nuclear. This Labour government is absolutely clear. We want economic opportunities for all parts of the UK. We want jobs and skills opportunities for people, including nuclear skills, across the UK. And those parties who are hell-bent on breaking our country apart are simply exposing the fact that they're willing to put their ideology before the jobs, opportunities and economic benefit of the people and communities of these isles.
And Davies.
Diolch yn fawr, Mr Llefarydd. In order to secure rural economic growth in Wales, we need to ensure that our agricultural sector is supported. Every pound spent in agriculture generates £9 by supporting farm workers, vets, feed merchants, machinery sales and repairs, local shops, and I could go on and on and on, to be honest. What is Wales Office doing to really support all of those who live and work in rural Wales?
So State.
The Honourable Lady will know that the Welsh Government have put extra money into farming this year through their budget, a budget that the party opposite, her party in the Senedd, voted against. We have renegotiated, we are renegotiating the SPS deal with the EU following our deal in May, and we are protecting farmers and food manufacturers across Wales.
Jim Shannon.
Mr. Speaker, I can thank the Minister very much for that. If we're going to improve economic growth in Wales, we can also do that collectively. We can do it with tidal energy, which Wales and Northern Ireland share the REC together. We can do it with wind turbines and floating wind turbines in the REC again. These are opportunities. We can make it the engineering for those in Northern Ireland, and Wales can do that as well. Does the Minister agree it's time for us to work together for this great United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland? Always better together.
The honourable gentleman has just set out very eloquently the case for the Union. The nationalists in front of him would break this country apart, ruining economic growth in this country. We are definitely all better together.
Oh, they start there next one. Right, we now come to Shadow Secretary of State, Ms Davis.
On Monday, it was delightful to observe the Chancellor and First Minister enjoying themselves in one of Wales's premier hospitality venues, but an invisible Secretary of State for Wales once again. It's this type of business that must be thriving if this government has any chance of achieving anything other than anaemic growth and growing unemployment lines. Mr. Speaker, I inquire, if she had been there, what the hospitality sector would have said about the minimum wage rises pressures, huge business rates and energy costs, tourism tax, NI hikes, and how it's strangling the economy in Wales, the bloated red tape and wanton spending from Labour-run Senedd as well.
Britain outperformed growth forecasts this year. Growth upgraded from 1% to 1.5%, and it's on course to achieve the second fastest growth rate among G7 countries. The Bank of England has cut interest rates 5 times since the election. The positive impact our UK and Welsh Labour governments are having is clear in how the Welsh economy is changing. Last year in Wales, wages have increased faster than inflation, employment has risen, inactivity is down, and inward investment is up.
Ms Davis.
So clearly something more important than economic growth in Wales came up for Labour's Welsh office. Can the ministers explain? And yet the biggest rise in unemployment in the UK was in Wales of 1.4%. Frankly, no surprise. Their joint refusal to build the M4 Relief Road, the North Wales main line, is not exactly matching the world-class infrastructure boast from the Chancellor at the summit. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask, amongst the hobnobbing and backslapping, did any ministers there spare any thought for the desolate owners and workers of businesses in tatters in Monmouth and wider, and did they work on the arse for extra help to save their livelihoods?
Well, there was a smorgasbord of questions there, I think. I will just say to her that her party wrecked the economy, starved our public services and exacerbated the cost of living crisis. Our Labour budget is reducing the cost of living, investing in public services and shrinking the national debt, which they increased, whilst at the same time lifting thousands of children out of poverty that the Tories created.
Jimmy Chabot, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to start by raising a point of order. The Secretary of State said that the Liberal Democrats were responsible for imposing the 2-child benefit cap. That's simply not true. It was imposed by the Conservatives, and we've campaigned tirelessly against it ever since. Will she correct the record?
It's your question now. Your question, please.
This government keeps claiming that offshore wind will bring down bills for people in Wales and drive economic growth. But research from Greenpeace shows the opposite is happening. The Crown Estate is pushing up bills by running uncapped auctions that force energy companies to pay huge fees just to use the seabed. Those extra costs are added straight onto the energy bills of families and businesses across Wales, meaning Welsh households pay more, the profits are taken out of Wales, while the Crown Estate CEO pockets £1.9 million a year. Why is the government allowing the Crown Estate to drive up energy bills, and why won't they force the Crown Estate to manage Welsh natural resources in the public interest rather than their own?
Every Wales questions, the honourable gentleman turns up and starts talking about how he doesn't want infrastructure built in Wales. His party were one of the architects of austerity and the crushing poverty faced by so many across the UK. This Labour government has turned the page on their austerity legacy, bringing down energy bills, increasing the minimum and living wages for around 160,000 Welsh workers and scrapping the two-child cap.
Sir Bull. Secretary. Minister.
I thank the member for raising this important matter. The Home Office is working closely with the Welsh Government to share information and coordinate work to prevent and respond to child sexual abuse and exploitation, including grooming gangs, and that includes taking forward the recommendation of Baroness Casey's audit, and I strongly welcome the continued support of the Welsh Government as we do so.
Mr. Speaker, Welsh Labour voted against a grooming gangs inquiry in the Senate. Labour in Westminster voted against a grooming gangs inquiry. Now Scottish MPs are bemoaning the lack of action from the SNP and the Scottish Government. With Welsh Labour also dragging their heels over this inquiry, will the Secretary of State step up and ensure that Welsh Labour have a Wales-wide inquiry into this horrific scandal?
I am disappointed in the honourable member. The member must have forgotten that the previous inquiry was not implemented in any way, shape or form. And we have accepted Baroness Casey's recommendations in full. We are working together, Welsh Government and the Home Office, alongside Baroness Casey to urgently appoint a chair. It is victims' voices that should be at the heart of this inquiry, and it is imperative that any chair appointed earns the trust of the victims who've been let down far too often. For those victims, we must get this right, and we can absolutely do no less.
Nick Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Minister say more on how the Government is reflecting the experiences of victims when tackling grooming gangs in Wales?
Minister.
Absolutely. I thank my honourable friend for raising this really critical matter. We are putting victims' voices right at the heart of this inquiry. Their voices must be heard. And we are ensuring we are accepting Baroness Casey's recommendations in full, including the introduction of a mandatory reporting, the creation of new Child Protection Authority, and ending the 3-year statute of limitations period for personal injury claims, making sure, once again, and I'll say this once again, that victims' voices are at the heart of this inquiry. They have been forgotten for far too long.
Number 5, please, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm delighted to hear about the new jobs created. Excuse me, Mr. Speaker. Announcements over the past month demonstrate that our industrial strategy is working. In November alone, this government announced investments to create over 11,000 jobs in Wales. The Wales Investment Summit just this week showcased investments totalling £16 billion, which are expected to bring tens of thousands of jobs to Wales.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Montgomeryshire and Glyndŵr is home to the largest one-day livestock market in Europe, just off the Buttington roundabouts in Welshpool. Will my right honourable friend join me in welcoming the 55 jobs that have been created within the last month alone on the Buttington roundabout? And would she consider joining me for a milkshake in one of the multiple places we could now get one together in Buttington?
Yay. Secretary of State.
I'm very pleased to hear of the new jobs created at Buttington Cross, and I'd be delighted to join him for a milkshake. Strawberry, please. Our landmark May deal with the EU included a commitment to a comprehensive SPS agreement, which we are now actively negotiating. This will reduce paperwork, delay and costs for Welsh farmers exporting their animals and produce to the EU. This government is backing our farmers and food manufacturers.
Jamie Stone, are you standing or not?
ONS reveal a scandal.
I did call Jamie Stone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Don't worry.
Mr. Speaker, I'll be brief. We've heard about the benefits that small modular reactors can bring to Wales and indeed to England. Would the Secretary of State agree with me it'd be a very good idea if the Secretary of State and I invited Mr John Swinney to come to Dounreay to hear from the workforce how badly they want one up there?
Minister.
I absolutely do not understand why the SNP government are not willing to see the creation of jobs and opportunities for people in Scotland because of their ideology around new nuclear.
Mims Davis, Shadow Secretary of State.
Why, thank you, Mr. Speaker. ONS reveal a scandalous 1,000 jobs are being lost every single day across the country, meaning Aston Martin is not immune from this government's economic recklessness and could soon be forced to make over 100 job losses because of the poor trade deal Labour struck with the US. Mr. Speaker, the deal absolutely has no guarantee that small volume car makers like Aston Martin get fair access to the 10% tariff rate from 2026, meaning they could face an eye-watering tariff of 27.5% being imposed if they are squeezed out of the 100,000 car quota to the US. What will the Welsh Secretary do? Will she turn up to ensure that the iconic Welsh car makers get fair access to the US trade?
Thursday.
I can tell the Honourable Lady that I have been in discussions with Aston Martin, as have Cabinet colleagues, and we are doing everything we can to protect the car industry in this country. One of the biggest problems arising in the car industry is due to their botched Brexit deal, for which she and her government were responsible.
John Cooper.
Question number 7, Mr. Speaker.
The Welsh tourism sector is thriving. Last year, British residents alone took over 7 million overnight trips to Wales. The Welsh Government's visitors levy could raise as much as £33 million a year across Wales to invest in communities and tourism if all councils were to introduce it. This is an excellent example of the Welsh Government leading the way. And as announced last week, a similar overnight levy will be introduced in England, allowing mayors to invest across their communities.
Cooper.
Mr. Speaker, hospitality in Wales and across the United Kingdom is dying on its feet. It needs a shot in the arm. Instead, the bin-fire budget last week gave it a shot in the head. This is more money coming out of businesses, is it not?
Minister.
Quite the contrary. This will boost the economy by up to £33 million if all councils were to accept that across Wales. I don't think that will...
The member going out should wait to 2 questions. Minister.
Wales is leading the way on this, and I am proud to be from a city, from Cardiff, where we're introducing this levy and where people come in droves, and I know they'll continue to come in droves. Perhaps the honourable member should look to his own ranks first, because Conservative-run Great Yarmouth Council have supported this form of tourist levy for years.
Alex Burris-Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the budget last week, the UK government gave... Thank you. Thank you so much. The UK government gave mayoral strategic authorities in England the power to propose local overnight visitor levies, something that has already been introduced in Wales. Does she agree with me that this is another example of the UK Labour government and the Welsh Labour government working together to share best practice to better our country? Can I also take the opportunity to ask her to join me in celebrating Cardiff Rugby's 149th birthday, which they celebrated this week?
Minister.
I thank the honourable member. And would also like to wish Cardiff Rugby a Pembroke Happis on their 149th birthday. But I absolutely agree with the honourable member. Welsh Government is leading the way, and it is fantastic to see a similar overnight levy introduced which will be introduced in England. This is the power of partnership, 2 Labour governments working together.
Before we come to Prime Minister's questions, may I extend a warm welcome to the President of the Parliament of Montenegro and his delegation who are in the gallery today. We now come to Prime Minister's questions. Number one goes to Ian Lavery. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our budget took important measures to tackle the cost of living. That's why we've frozen rail fares, prescription charges and cut energy bills for every family by £150. Today, Mr. Speaker, we're going further. For too long, parents have been pushed into spending more on infant formula than needed, told they're paying for better quality and left hundreds of pounds out of pocket. I can announce today that we're changing that. We will take action to give parents and carers the confidence to access infant formula at more affordable prices, with clearer guidance for retailers and helping new parents use loyalty points and vouchers. Together, Mr. Speaker, that will save them up to £500 before their child's first birthday. That builds on our action to lift 500,000 children out of poverty and breakfast clubs, and our child poverty strategy will be published later this week. This morning, I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The North East is still picking up the pieces of the destruction and decimation of 14 years of Tory government. Men in the North East of England still expect to live 10 years less than people in other parts of the country. Women in the North East of England are making, on average, more than £11,000 in wage than people in other parts of the country. 33% of kids in my patch in Blythe and Ashington are living in poverty. The unemployment rates are above the national average, and the national wages are below the national average. You know, Mr. Speaker, the people in the North East are a proud breed, and we deserve much more than this, mine. Can I ask the Prime Minister if he can assure me and the people in my constituency and in the North East if there's much to look forward to on the horizon? And will he meet with me to discuss how we can shape it?
Prime Minister.
He talks about poverty in his constituency and they heckle him. They should be ashamed. It is our moral mission to tackle poverty, Mr. Speaker. We've abolished the two-child cap. That will be over 3,000 children, I think, in his constituency lifted out of poverty. I'm very proud to be able to do that. We've boosted the national minimum wage by £1,500. We're adding £150 that we're taking off everyone's energy bills. We're driving economic growth right across the country, devolving power and investing across all of the country.
Come to the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Beno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I first of all pay tribute to Sir John Stanley, who passed away yesterday. Sir John was a dedicated MP for 41 years, and we send our deepest condolences to his family. Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister believe that when an organisation descends into total shambles, the person at the top should resign?
Mr. Speaker, can I first join in her comments in relation to Sir John, and I'm sure I speak for the whole House in that respect. Mr. Speaker, I was very proud to lead this party at the budget last week, where the Chancellor set out that we would protect the NHS, which we've done in the budget, create the conditions for economic stability, not repeating the mistake of austerity, and bearing down on the cost of living by taking £150 off energy bills. We're fixing the mess that they left, and I'm very proud to be doing so.
Mr. Speaker, he doesn't want to answer a question about taking responsibility because he likes to blame everyone else except himself, and so does the Chancellor. We now know that the head of the OBR was forced out for telling the truth, that the Chancellor did not need to raise taxes on working people. We also know that the Chancellor was briefing the media, twisting the facts, also she could break her promises and raise taxes. Mr. Speaker, if she was a CEO, she would have been fired, and she might even have been prosecuted for market abuse. That's why we've written to the Financial Conduct Authority. So will the Prime Minister ensure the Chancellor fully cooperates with any investigation?
Mr. Speaker, she's completely losing the plot. She clearly didn't read. May I pay tribute to Richard Hughes and his leadership of the OBR? He made very clear why he stepped down, and I've made very clear my support of the OBR. But she says take responsibility. Under this Chancellor, Mr. Speaker, growth is up this year, defeating and beating the forecast. Wages are up, more since the general election than in 10 years of the Tories. We've had, I think, 5 interest rate cuts. NHS waiting lists are down. We've had record investment into this country. We're turning the page on their austerity and reckless experiment on borrowing. I'd compare that record to them every day of the week.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister talks about losing the plot. Let me read to him what his own cabinet members are saying, and I quote, "The handling of this budget has been a disaster from start to finish." Yes. Who said that? Was it him? Was it her? In fact, I think it was probably her, actually. It was probably the Chancellor. In fact, Mr. Speaker, one of his ministers said the Chancellor and Prime Minister look weak and incompetent. The country agrees. We know that there were endless Treasury briefings to justify raising taxes on hard-working people to pay for benefits. And those briefings had real-world consequences. Hundreds of thousands of people drew down their pension, an irreversible act. So the Prime Minister pays tribute to the head of the OBR. If the head of the OBR had to resign over market-sensitive leaks, why is the Chancellor still in her job?
Mr. Speaker, last year they left us with a £22 billion black hole. This year, at the beginning of the process, the OBR did a productivity review on their record in office, and that cost an additional £16 billion that we had to find in the budget. But notwithstanding that, Mr. Speaker, we protected the NHS, waiting times are coming down. Notwithstanding that, we've got cutting borrowing at the fastest rate in the G7. Notwithstanding that, we've got £150 off energy bills. That's added to rail bills and prescription as well.
Order. Mr. Holden, your voice carries more than mine. The difference is yours will be carrying outside, not in the chamber. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what she doesn't understand is that picking up a £16 billion tab for their failure is not a good starting point for any budget. And the OBR said yesterday, Mr. Speaker, that the Chancellor's speech was not misleading. So if the Leader of the Opposition had any decency, she'd get up now and apologise.
Mr. Speaker.
You might be enjoying a cup of tea with Mr. Holden if you carry on.
Mr. Speaker, no one believes a word that the Prime Minister says. We now know the black hole was fake, her book was fake, her CV was fake, even her chest claims are made up. She doesn't belong in the Treasury, she belongs in La La Land. They raised taxes on working people, that's £16 billion, was to increase benefits to protect them from their backbenchers. He now boasts about removing the 2-child benefit cap. But he used to say that it was unaffordable. He even removed the whip from 7 of them for wanting the same thing. He is very happy to throw them under a bus when it pleases him. So I asked the Prime Minister, how did it suddenly become affordable at the very time he needed to save his own skin?
Mr. Speaker, the vast majority of families we helped in the budget are in work. Yes. 3/4 of children in poverty are in working families. Their policy of nearly 10 years on the 2-child benefit cap had one result and one result only. It dragged hundreds of thousands of children into poverty. They should be utterly ashamed of that. And I'm very proud that we're lifting 500,000 children out of poverty, because I profoundly believe that every child should have a chance in life. Every child should be able to go as far as their talent will take them. So that's why we're lifting 500,000 out of poverty. But they're the same old Tories, the party of child poverty.
If all of this is true, why did he take the whip away from the people who are asking for it? let's remind the Chancellor, exactly a year ago today, on the 3rd of December 2024, the Chancellor said, "We will never have to repeat a budget like this one." If only. He may have taken the whip away, but the rebels have the last laugh. The Prime Minister has lost. He can't run his own party. He can't, let alone the country, Mr. Speaker. Let me quote what the hard-left former Shadow Chancellor said. He said, "We've won." He's right, isn't he?
Prime Minister. Speaker, I've said repeatedly that bringing down child poverty is a moral mission, a political mission and a personal mission. They drove hundreds of thousands of children into poverty who will pay the price for the rest of their lives for their failure. We're taking 500,000 of them out of poverty. Very proud to do so. That is good for children, it's good for the economy, and it's good for the NHS, who will have less of a burden on them. They should be ashamed of what they did on child poverty, and she should stand up and she should apologise.
Mr. Speaker, let me tell the Prime Minister. Making the whole country poorer and destroying jobs is not how you keep children out of poverty. In the past week, we've seen broken promises, broken leadership, and a broken budget for Benefit Street. The Education Secretary is chuntering. Where is the money for the children on special educational needs? Where is it? Unemployment is up. It's coming out of her budget. She's shaking her head. She doesn't know where that money is coming from. But let's be clear, Mr. Speaker. Unemployment is up. There are more children now growing up in workless households because people are losing their jobs. It's not just the head of the OBR who's losing his job. Millions of people have been hung out to dry by their budget. And isn't the truth, Mr. Speaker, that behind it all is a Prime Minister who only cares about one person's job, his own?
Mr. Speaker, she wants to put 500,000 children back into poverty. She thinks the Chancellor should resign because the economy is improving. We are turning the page on their failure. We are bringing waiting lists down. We're bringing stability that cuts inflation and interest rates. And we're bringing down bills. We're building a brighter future.
Conversations about a new Ireland are deepening, with people from all sorts of backgrounds having serious, hopeful discussions about building something new. Yesterday here in Westminster, along with the member for South Antrim, who has a different view to me, we hosted two of the island's most respected journalists, making the case both for and against Irish unity. While both positions were argued, clear voice was at the time for careful preparation is now. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that while there is much work to do before any referendum, that to avoid a mess like Brexit, it is prudent and completely compatible with the Good Friday Agreement for the Irish and British governments to jointly prepare for constitutional change?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank her for her question? One of the greatest achievements of the last Labour government was the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, and we fully support that agreement, which brought peace and stability for Northern Ireland. It does, as she well knows, set out a process for future decisions, which under the agreement I support. And we are focused in working constructively with the Executive and others on all issues, including the record settlement under the budget for Northern Ireland.
The Liberal Democrat, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Leader of the Opposition in paying tribute to Sir John Stanley and sending our condolences to his family? I had the huge pleasure of working with him over a number of years on developing the relationship between our country and Korea, and he was always a true gentleman. Mr. Speaker, yesterday I was in Royal Tunbridge Wells, where tens of thousands of people have had no water for 5 days. This is now a public health emergency, and shockingly, it's the second time in just 3 years when South East Water have let down the people of Tunbridge Wells badly. Parents are queuing up for bottled water for their kids. Pensioners are relying on neighbours to fetch some water for them. Businesses have closed down. Schools and GPs have been forced to shut. South East Water said it would be sorted on Monday, then yesterday, and today it still hasn't been sorted. So will the Prime Minister convene COBRA Does he agree that it's time for him to get a grip of this crisis so it is sorted?
Well, can I thank him for raising this really important issue? And it is shocking for all the reasons he set out. And I too have heard South East Water say, as he rightly says, actually Sunday into Monday, Monday into Tuesday, and Tuesday into Wednesday, that they were sorting it, and they still haven't sorted, and there's really serious consequences. And we are bearing down on that, as he would expect, because it's such a serious issue.
Sir Ed Davey.
Prime Minister's reply and the actions of the Water Minister, but I do think the government will need to do more because South East Water have failed so badly. If I can turn to the budget now, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister's chief economic advisor has recommended a customs union with the EU as one of the most effective ways of generating growth, and we agree. So instead of hitting people with higher taxes in the middle of a cost of living crisis, will the Prime Minister change course in economic policy and listen to the piece of wise economic advice from his own economics advisor?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, we are getting closer relationships with the EU on a number of fronts, including trade and the economy, because that is good for businesses across our country, has been welcomed by them. We'll continue down that path, but we do have clear red lines in relation to the single market and the customs union. So within those constraints, we will move closer.
Dr. Becky Cooper.
Mr. Speaker, gambling addiction is a serious public health harm, causing ill health and misery for millions of people in this country. The industry now spends £2 billion a year on advertising, often targeting vulnerable people and exposing our children to harm. Along with many members across this House, I very much welcome the Chancellor's announcement last week to tax harmful online gambling products. Would the Prime Minister agree with me, therefore, that to continue this essential work, we must now act to tackle harmful gambling advertising to protect the health of our children?
Prime Minister. Well, I thank her for raising this, because she's right that harm from online gambling has surged. Mr. Speaker, NHS referrals are up 91% in the past year. The decisions we made in the budget mean investment in public services and lifting over 500,000 children out of poverty. But we are working with industry to ensure that adverts don't exacerbate harm. And through our £26 million investment, we're helping the Gambling Commission crack down on black market sites and illegal adverts to keep players safe.
Paul Holmes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In 2020, the Justice Secretary said criminal trials without juries are a bad idea. The Prime Minister himself said there should be a right to trial by jury in all criminal cases. Now they want to scrap them. Mr. Speaker, with a Chancellor who can't count and a Justice Secretary who's lost count of the number of people he's let out of prison, is it any wonder that the people of this country can't trust a single word this Prime Minister or government says ever again?
Mr. Speaker, they left a broken criminal justice system where victims of rape and serious sexual violence are waiting 3 or 4 years for trial. Only this week I've heard further examples of 14-year-old girls and 16-year-old girls having to give evidence 4 years after the allegation. That is not justice for them, and I'm determined that we will deal with it. Now, as he well knows, of all criminal cases going to court, 90% have always been in the magistrates' court. 90%. 10% go to the Crown Court. Of that 10%, 7% plead guilty. That means that 3% of all criminal cases go forward for a jury trial. Not all of our cases. We are making changes, sensible changes, to ensure that we can make sure that victims get justice and it's denied under the failure that they left.
John Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm really pleased to hear many constituents tell me how much local NHS services have improved since this Labour government entered office. But some, like David Wootton from Atherstone, have faced long delays. He was told he'd have to wait 5 months for X-ray results from George Eliot Hospital, and he's not the only one. My constituents in North Warwickshire and Bedworth deserve better. Can the Prime Minister set out how he will go further and faster to get our NHS fighting fit again?
Prime Minister. Can I start by saying I'm sorry to hear that David, her constituent, is waiting. We did take decisions at the budget to invest in the NHS and tackle waiting lists. And that is to help people like David. We delivered £29 billion extra investment into the NHS and scrapped NHS England to invest in the front line. We are opening, Mr Speaker, 250 neighbourhood health centres to treat patients closer to home, and we've got over 5 million extra appointments being delivered. And waiting lists are down 230,000. They chunted, they absolutely destroyed our health service, and we're picking it up. They should be ashamed of themselves.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My constituent Claire, she runs Claire Howard Jewellery in Fakenham, and she's just one of many small business owners who contacted me after the budget from last week. She was absolutely incensed by the style of the Chancellor, where she seemed to give the impression that she was reducing taxes on small businesses, when the exact opposite is the case. Claire's tax is going up on her shop, not coming down. So could the Prime Minister do Claire and many other shop owners the common courtesy of just admitting that their taxes are going up and not down?
Prime Minister. He raises an important point. Let me address it. Because at the heart of this issue is that temporary business rate relief was put in during the pandemic by the last government. That was the right thing to do, and we supported it, but it was temporary relief. That is now coming to an end, and obviously there's a re-evaluation that goes with it. So what we're doing is permanently lowering the rates for leisure, retail and hospitality, but because of what the changes are, we're putting in transitional relief of £4 billion. That means there'll be a cap on increases for small businesses, and we're finding that by adjusting the burden between them and the online giants. But in the end, it's the temporary business rates coming to an end that we have to adjust through this policy.
Oliver Ryan.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I declare an interest as the chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Multiple Sclerosis and as the proud son of a lifelong multiple sclerosis patient, and she joins us in the gallery today. Neurological conditions like MS or Parkinson's affect 1 in 6, but wait times for first and follow-up neurology appointments have increased by a huge 65% since 2020, risking delayed treatment and diagnosis at critical time. Now, I'm proud this government is bringing NHS waiting lists down, cutting emissions, investing in care and equipment. But will my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, formalise these efforts and support an NHS modern service framework for neurology and get these wait times down?
Prime Minister. Can I thank him for his question and for sharing the personal interest that he has in this. We are focused on bringing down waiting lists and making sure every patient receives the best possible care. As he knows, the 10-year health plan announced a new modern service framework to help rapidly improve care, and I'll reassure him we'll do absolutely consider whatever else we can do. And in the meantime, we're acting to improve neurology care and have cut wait time for care, neurology waiting times by over 15,000.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Alison in Oxford is threatened with new service charges by her housing association Green Square Accord for shrubbery she happily cut herself for 22 years and a cleaning of a communal area that simply doesn't exist. Meanwhile, Rebecca's charges have more than doubled over the last 4 years with no explanation why. They are not the only provider doing this. It's a wild west out there. So will this government consider Liberal Democrat plans for a new regulator and a cap on these outrageous rip-off service charges?
Prime Minister. Well, can I thank her for raising that? And we are implementing the Leasehold and Freehold Reform Act, which is long overdue, providing homeowners with greater rights, powers and protections. And through this, we will strengthen regulation to protect leaseholders from abuse and poor service, which she's highlighted, bring the injustice of leasehold to an end. That'll protect up to 1.75 million households and make sure leaseholders receive standardised service charge documentation, making it easier for them to challenge unreasonable bills, because the points she makes are good points, and this bill will help change that.
Graham Stringer.
Mr Speaker, this country can be proud of its history of religious tolerance and religious freedom. The quid pro quo of that is the right to criticise religion. Can the Prime Minister ensure this House that there will be no introduction or reintroduction of a blasphemy law, either by statute, by judicial overreach, or by a non-statutory definition of Islamophobia?
Yes, I can give him that assurance, and it's important that I do so.
Lewis Cocking.
Mr. Speaker, the best form of welfare in this country should be a well-paid job. But with unemployment up and this Labour government has chosen to raise taxes to spend more on an even bloated welfare and benefit system, is the Prime Minister happy with the message that sends to my hard-working constituents in Broxbourne and constituents from right across the United Kingdom?
We have a broken welfare system. Who broke it? Guess. The party opposite. We're bringing in reforms to change it and mend it. And what did they do? They voted against them. And under their watch, they drove up welfare spending by £33 billion, so we need no lectures from them on welfare.
Mr. Speaker, as a lifelong Dale fan, I'm delighted that Rochdale Football Club are top of the National League right now. But after 14 years of Tory cuts, sadly, my town is near the top of another league table, a league table people don't want to be in, the child poverty league table. So does the Prime Minister agree that lifting 5,000 kids out of poverty in Rochdale, plus cutting the energy bills by 150 quid for every household, and crucially expanding the Warm Homes discount, will mean that this budget is a family budget that reduces the cost of living for everyone in the country?
Let me start by congratulating Rochdale Football Club for being top of the league for the time being. Of course, well, I say that because I know who's top of the Premier League, but it will be March and April we'll actually find out who wins. But, Mr. Speaker, he's right. Thanks to the actions in the budget, every household will see £150 off their energy bills, and because we've extended the Warm Homes discount now to 6 million of the poorest households, they will also save an additional £150. Now, in the North West, that benefits about 280,000 households. That's a huge cost of living support for families, alongside freezing prescription charges, rail fares and boosting the minimum wage.
Liz Jarvis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent Tracy owns O'Brien's, a lovely cafe in the heart of Eastleigh. She works tirelessly to make it a success, but spiralling costs, including business rates, VAT and the hike to employers' national insurance contributions, mean she hasn't been able to take a salary for 4 months. David, the owner of Steamtown Brewery, and Jane, the manager of the Holiday Inn in my constituency, say their businesses will be impacted by the government's stealth tax on our high streets. They feel let down. So will the Prime Minister look again at our call for an emergency cut on VAT for hospitality?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we put in place a strategy for small businesses, which was broadly welcomed by small businesses because they contributed to it. And that involves some of the key asks that they made of us, including late payment and for hospitality, greater flexibility when it comes to licensing. Of course, we'll always look at other measures that can help small businesses. We set out quite a lot of them in our small business strategy.
Andrew Pakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the weekend, I had the great privilege to join volunteers from Peterborough Food Bank at the Tesco in Warrington on their autumn food drive. I'd like to put on record my thanks to my constituents and those of other honourable members who supported this Trussell Trust initiative over the last week. One of the most significant challenges my food bank have consistently talked to me about is child poverty. And even though the party opposite oppose our plans, nearly 9,000 children will be lifted out of poverty across Peterborough because of the decisions our Chancellor took in the budget last week. Does the Prime Minister agree with me? This isn't just the right thing to do for these children, it's an investment in our future and in our growth.
Prime Minister. I thank him for raising this, and I was in his constituency just the other week, and we could see the impact that this measure would have on children. In Peterborough, as he says, 9,000 children living in poverty. In his constituency, 5,500 children living in poverty, and we are lifting them out of poverty, and that is the right thing to do. The party opposite shamefully dragged hundreds of thousands of children into poverty, and they will pay that price for the rest of their lives. They should be ashamed of themselves.
I was recently the target of an AI deepfake video announcing my defection to reform. And as colleagues across the House will know, that's about as likely as reform moving from pub populism to a coherent programme for government. I'm delighted to reassure my Chief Whip and the House that I am and always have been a faithful Conservative. But does the Prime Minister agree with me that while satire has always been an important part of our politics, the rise of AI deepfake disruption is a serious threat to our democracy, and would he agree to work with me and cross-party MPs to frame some appropriate reforms as proposed by the recent Speakers' Conference to protect our democratic integrity?
Well, can I thank him for raising that? And it is an important issue. We do need to work cross-party where we can on deepfake, on AI and other issues that need to be addressed. I had, I'm afraid, missed his alleged defection to reform. I wouldn't have believed it if I had seen it. But I have to say, there's a lot of them going. There's three ex-MPs have gone, I think, this week. They talk about leaks. That's where their leaks are going, to reform. And I saw a leak, talking of leaks, on the front page of the Financial Times this morning, where apparently the leader of Reform says he wants to merge with the party opposite and sit down here with them. An absolutely unholy alliance of austerity and failure.
Elsa Blundell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week I've been speaking to Tetrasil, warehouse workers at Tetrasil in my constituency, who have been given an appalling ultimatum in the run-up to Christmas: either sign a new contract with reduced pay and breaks, or lose your jobs. Can the Prime Minister advise me what action can be taken against rogue employers like Tetrasil who take action against workers and seek to exploit them and undermine their rights?
Well, can I thank her for raising this and for fighting hard for her constituents who are facing awful uncertainty, which is bad enough at any time of the year, is really bad at this time of the year. And our thoughts are with the workers and their families who are facing the uncertainty that she has flagged. Our landmark Employment Rights Bill will strengthen workers' rights and put them in a better position, including ending unscrupulous fire and rehire practices. But I thank her for fighting for her constituents.
Shocker Adam.
Speaker, no religion, no theology, no philosophy is beyond critique or scrutiny, and we must protect freedom of speech at all costs. But Islamophobia is real. At least for Zainab Hussein in my city, who was run over not just once, but twice simply for being a Muslim. She survived. Not so lucky was Makram Ali, who was killed outside Finsbury Mosque simply for being Muslim. Not so lucky was Muhammad Salim, who was stabbed to death simply for being a Muslim. I would like to ask the Prime Minister that in opposition, a definition of Islamophobia was adopted. In government, it has been dropped. Can I ask what's changed?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank him for raising those examples of hatred in his constituency, and he's right to raise them, and we should all condemn them. Hatred in all its forms should be condemned by all of us in this House, and that includes anti-Muslim hatred as well, and we intend to act on it.
Right. Please, Anna Dixon.
Mr. Speaker, this week I met constituents Mike and Sue. Their autistic son, Jimmy, was imprisoned as a young man. The judge recommended a sentence of 2.5 years. Jimmy is now in his 40s. He's been in prison for nearly 20 years on an IPP sentence. Jimmy's doctors say he's safe and well for discharge. There's a supported living flat waiting for him in Shipley. Will the Prime Minister please help by ending the injustice of these IPP sentences and help get Jimmy home?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank her for raising this case? She raised it with me in the lobby last night, and it is a really shocking case of 2 years, leading to someone being in prison already over 20 years and not yet released, and with delays in the release process. The Justice Secretary will look into this case and meet to discuss her concerns to see what more can be done. It's right that IPP sentence has been abolished, and we're committed to supporting the progression of all those who are serving such sentences.
Rachel Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a charming elderly constituent who, after a series of very major medical interventions, has been left in excruciating, uncontrolled pain after her opioids were withdrawn, pushing her to suicidal ideations. Can the Prime Minister shed light on what plans His Majesty's Government has to help people manage pain to live a happier and more comfortable life? And please, can I have a meeting with the appropriate minister?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank her for raising what's an awful case? And we are putting in further protection and support, but I will take her up. I think it is important for her to discuss that with the relevant minister, because the case that she has referred to does sound appalling.
Jane Kirkham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Under this Labour government, NHS waiting lists are coming down. I welcome the commitment to refurbish Truro Health Park in my constituency, one of the first new neighbourhood health centres in the country. Cornwall's already leading the way with new neighbourhood health teams, and upgrading Truro Health Park will help deliver care for patients in their own communities. Will the Prime Minister confirm this investment reflects decisions taken by this government to prioritise community healthcare, and that services won't be removed before effective community replacements do come online?
Prime Minister.
Well, thank you for raising this. I'm delighted that her constituency will benefit from one of the new 250 centres. Neighbourhood health centres will provide simpler, more convenient access to a full range of health and care services on people's doorsteps, and GP services will be protected before it comes online. This is about early intervention, Mr. Speaker, continuing to drive down NHS waiting lists and creating a more modern NHS that is fit for the future.
Mr.
Speaker, could the Prime Minister give his assessment of the latest news that President Putin has again turned down terms for peace in Ukraine, and in the light of his extraordinary outburst designed to destabilise our understanding of the truth? He did say Russia is ready for war with NATO. How ready are we?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank him for raising this? And I updated the House last week on the attempts to get a lasting peace. We all know that Putin is the aggressor here. We all know that Putin is dragging his feet, not wanting to come to the table, not wanting to reach an agreement. We have to continue to put pressure on in every conceivable way. That is in supporting Ukraine with capability and resource, but also ensuring that our sanctions, acting with allies, do as much damage to the economy in Russia as we can, and pressure that we can put on. We'll continue to do so. But he's absolutely right to raise it, and I thank him for doing so.
That completes Prime Minister's questions. Let the Chamber change over.
Thank you, Mr.
Right, we come to the first urgent question. Sir Mel Stride, Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Mr. Speaker, to ask the Chancellor of the Exchequer if she will make a statement on the resignation of the Chair of the OBR.
Minister Murray.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, last week the economic and fiscal outlook was accessed prematurely ahead of the budget. The OBR took full responsibility for this and conducted a review into what had happened. That report was published on Monday, and I came to this House to make a statement. That report found, and I quote, systemic issues, which led, in their words, to the worst failure in the 15-year history of the OBR. Whilst I was making that statement on Monday afternoon, Richard Hughes, the chair of the OBR, resigned. The Chancellor has written to Mr. Hughes to thank him for his many years of public service, and I have put my thanks on record in this House too. That decision was a matter for Mr. Hughes. We will work closely with the OBR to ensure robust security arrangements are in place before the spring forecast and for all future forecasts. The Permanent Secretary of the Treasury will conduct a review of the Treasury's security processes to inform future fiscal events. As I said when I was again at this dispatch box closing the budget debate yesterday, the government puts the utmost weight on budget security, including prevention of leaks of information. A leak inquiry is now underway with the full support of the Chancellor and the whole Treasury team. Mr. Speaker, there is also speculation in the press today surrounding the letter which the OBR sent to the Treasury Select Committee last Friday, which I wish to address clearly. The Chancellor was aware of that letter and she was content for it to be published, and she agreed this with the Permanent Secretary.
Bill Stride.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Richard Hughes was a respected chair of the OBR, and his departure is a matter of deep regret. The circumstances surrounding his resignation remain unclear. Although, Mr. Speaker, for the Chancellor it has clearly been a useful distraction from her own conduct. Mr. Speaker, on Friday, the OBR took the unprecedented step of publishing the details of the pre-measures forecast rounds, and at the Select Committee yesterday, members of the OBR board were clear that this step was taken because of serious concerns about partial leaks and briefings about their forecasts. And in relation to the market-moving briefings made on the 14th of November, which suggested that the public finances were, after all, in a better position, David Miles at the committee stated, and I quote, "I think there had been a misconception that there had been some good news. It didn't exist." They also clarified that these concerns were raised by Richard Hughes with the Treasury before the budget, and that the information published on Friday was approved by the Permanent Secretary. So can I ask the Minister, what discussions did the Treasury have, including the Chancellor, with Mr. Hughes immediately prior to his resignation? Mr. Hughes said last week that he served subject to the confidence of the Chancellor. Did the Chancellor give Mr. Hughes her full confidence? Was any pressure put on Mr. Hughes to resign? Did the Chancellor approve the OBR's publication on Friday and discuss with the Permanent Secretary? I believe the Minister has confirmed that. Perhaps he would do so again.
Yes. In which case, behave.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Do ministers agree with the OBR's opinion that there were leaks and briefings about the forecasts that damaged growth? If so, what action was taken by the Treasury regarding those leaks? And can I ask once again in this House whether it was appropriate that the Chancellor herself was opining publicly on the OBR's productivity forecast before the budget, given that these matters should remain strictly confidential? Mr. Speaker, as you know, I've written to the FCA seeking a full investigation into these matters relating to the Chancellor's statements on the state of the public finances. I have also written again this morning to the Permanent Secretary at the Treasury requesting a full investigation into all these matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Shadow Chancellor for his questions. Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, as I made clear in my opening remarks, the decision for Richard Hughes to resign was a matter for Mr. Hughes himself. I referred also in my earlier remarks to the media reporting around the letter that the OBR published. That publication of the OBR letter was agreed to by the Chancellor, and it is completely untrue to suggest otherwise. And the reason for publishing that letter was due to the unique nature of this budget in the context of the OBR's productivity review, as they said themselves, whilst acknowledging that this would not become usual practice due to the importance of preserving a private space for discussions. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are completely committed to the OBR's independence, and it is a vital part of our fiscal framework. And in fact, one of the first acts of this Parliament was to introduce a fiscal lock so the OBR could never be sidelined. The Shadow Chancellor also referred to comments by Professor Miles at the Treasury Committee earlier this week. And I note that amongst his remarks, he said the fact that it was a positive number, referring to the headroom on the October 31st forecast, he was very keen to be clear now that this did not in any way suggest that the OBR assessment was that the fiscal outlook was problem-free.
Dame Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, when I last spoke in this House, Richard Hughes was still chair of the OBR. I want to pay tribute to him. He was a tenacious champion of its independence, a highly intellectual man who ably led that organisation, and he made an honourable decision to take responsibility for what happened last Wednesday. The Minister has said that there is now a leak inquiry underway in the Treasury. Leak inquiries can have a habit of not finding someone responsible, but if somebody is found responsible, will they follow the lead set by Richard Hughes?
Minister.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I will not speculate on the outcome of the leak inquiry, but it is underway now with the Chancellor's support. The Government takes our obligations to this House very seriously, and we delivered a budget last week which delivers on the priorities of the British people.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Charlie Maynard.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On behalf of my party, I would like to thank Richard Hughes for his service, and we respect his resignation. We would also like to thank Laura Gardner, Professor Kieran Martin and Hugh Stevens for the very quick turnaround of the investigation report into the leak. In the report, the point was made that unlike all other IT systems and services, the OBR's website is locally managed and outside of the gov.uk network. The reasons for this decision were made at the time apparently to ensure full independence from the Treasury. Will the Minister soon report back to this House with a timeline for when decisions will be made between now and the OBR's next report in spring 2026 as to how this will be operated going forward, and also provide an outline of how the OBR's website will be operated so that it is both secure and maintain appropriate separation between the Treasury and the OBR?
Madam Deputy Speaker, as I've made clear, the Treasury will be focused in the coming months on ensuring that we have stronger information security in the spring forecast and indeed for all future forecasts. The OBR, it's worth my adding, has had significantly increased funding in recent years. Since 2021-22, its budget has increased by 45%. And as an independent organisation, it has full discretion over how it uses its budget.
Yuan Yang.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I join the chair of my Treasury Select Committee in thanking Richard Hughes for his service and commend him for taking responsibility for the security leak that happened under his watch. In the testimony the OBR gave the Select Committee yesterday, they described the 21 billion amount of absolute forecast-to-forecast changes that happens to their own pre-measures forecast. What that means, in effect, is that between every 6 month forecast, £21 billion on average is wiped off the headroom or added to the headroom on average. What this leads me to be concerned for, Madam Deputy Speaker, is how we can ensure long-termism in the fiscal institutions of the UK, despite this overall focus on headroom.
Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her question. And of course, the Chancellor set out how important it was to increase our headroom at the budget. We increased it to £21.7 billion, which is so critical for reducing the cost of borrowing and for protecting us against future shocks. As the Chancellor also announced at budget, the forecast that the OBR will produce in spring will not include an assessment of the government's performance against the fiscal rules, and the government will not respond to it with fiscal policy. But the OBR will produce a forecast in spring as would be expected.
Father of the House, Sir Edward Lee.
For what it's worth, I think the OBR has become too powerful, and we live in a parliamentary democracy, not a quangocracy, and the Chancellor alone should be responsible. But does he agree with this point, that in future all communications between the Chancellor and the OBR should be in deep private? That's the only way the system will work. And we never again want to have selective leaks. Can he promise that won't happen in the next budget?
Minister.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Right Honourable Gentleman and I disagree about the role of the OBR, because as a government we are committed to the OBR's independence and its vital role as a core part of our fiscal framework. And as I mentioned earlier, one of our first acts in this Parliament was to introduce the fiscal lock to ensure the OBR could never be sidelined in the way it was by the previous government. In terms of the private space between the OBR and the Treasury, the publication of the OBR's letter, which, as I mentioned earlier, was agreed to by the Chancellor, was due to the unique nature of his budget in the context of the OBR's productivity review. We acknowledge that it would not become usual practice due to the importance of preserving a private space for the conversations.
Luke Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I share the remarks of my fellow members of the Treasury Select Committee in commending the work of Richard Hughes, and also for taking responsibility for what the OBR itself acknowledged was the worst failure in its 15-year history. One of the other things that the Professor Miles also testified in front of the Treasury Select Committee yesterday, was, which the Shadow Chancellor failed to mention, is that the remarks of the Chancellor on the 4th of November were entirely consistent with the forecast that was set out by the OBR at the time, and was not as rosy a fiscal picture as the benches opposite now bizarrely claim was in place at the time. Does he agree?
Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question, and he's absolutely right to point to some of the comments by Professor Miles at the Treasury Committee early this week. Indeed, there's been a lot of discussion in this place around the £4.2 billion of headroom that was identified in the forecast by the OBR on October the 31st, and our view of what that implied about the fiscal situation. And Professor Miles indeed said at the Treasury Committee that a number that was £4 billion in the pre-measures forecast is not inconsistent with the sentiment that this is a very challenging fiscal position. And it is because of that fiscal position that we made the choices that we did.
Dame Harriet Baldwin.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I welcome the fact that the Minister has just confirmed that a leak inquiry is underway at the Treasury, and will be paying close attention to that inquiry. Richard Hughes was an outstanding public servant, and he was truly independent. And will the Minister confirm that the person that the Chancellor nominates to this position has to be endorsed by the Treasury Select Committee, and that he will commit to someone of equal independence and stature being nominated to that position?
Minister.
Well, I thank the Right Honourable lady for her question, and as she'll know, the process is now underway for an external recruitment of the new chair of the OBR. The normal process will be followed in terms of the Chancellor making the appointment, the Treasury Committee being involved in the way that it is. She mentioned that the leak inquiry, I confirmed it today. I've confirmed it again today. I also mentioned it in my remarks to this House yesterday.
Clive Efford.
Madam Deputy Speaker, over the years that I've been here, I've seen many budgets, and the government side waves its order paper on the day and then watches over the next 48 hours as the budget unravels. And we don't seem to have had any of that with this budget. But it's been extraordinarily tight in terms of what it sought to achieve. And it's the Tories are protesting over there because about the individuals involved rather than the content of the budget itself, because they've got very little argument to make.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right to draw attention to the fact that whilst the process around the budget is of course important, what this budget means for people across Britain is that we have cut the cost of living, continue to cut NHS waiting lists and cut government borrowing.
Dugan.
The head of the OBR has taken responsibility and resigned, just like the Director General of the BBC took responsibility for that crisis and resigned. Given that the UK is now in the throes of a full-on fiscal crisis of the Chancellor's own making, both materially by removing £66 billion from the economy with no corresponding stimulus, and objectively by briefings, counter-briefings, screeching U-turns, leaks, and a profound lack of discretion over market-sensitive information. Given that backdrop, why will the Chancellor not now resign?
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chancellor has delivered a budget which takes the challenges of this country head-on, which cuts the cost of living, continues to cut NHS waiting lists, cut government borrowing, and meets the priorities of the British people.
Rachel Blake.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The investigation that the OBR undertook had two particularly striking findings. The first was about the number of attempts to access the particular documents in question, and the second, I believe, is the lack of security for these particular documents. Can the Minister share with this House what specific actions he believes the OBR should take to overcome this for future fiscal events? And does he agree with me that it's possible to have confidence in the principle of an independent OBR alongside undertaking meaningful and significant scrutiny into some of the actions of the current organisation?
Well, I very much agree with the sentiment in my honourable friend's question there, and that the OBR is a vitally important part of our fiscal framework. And indeed, as I mentioned earlier, one of the first acts we took upon taking government was to strengthen its role to ensure it could never be sidelined. And actually, it is precisely because we see it as taking such an important place in our fiscal framework that it's important that we maintain its integrity and trust as an organisation. And my honourable friend asked me what further steps the OBR will be taking. Well, we as a government will work with the National Cyber Security Centre and the OBR to take forward the recommendation that a forensic examination of potential premature access at previous fiscal events is carried out. I would add that there's no evidence of hostile cyber activity, but the findings of the OBR report indicated access at previous fiscal events, and that's a very serious matter that we will investigate.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Richard Hughes was a first-rate public servant, but he did the right thing on the narrow matter of the premature upload of the file last week. But the OBR representatives told us a number of things yesterday at the Treasury Select Committee. They told us that there was a 16 billion downgrade. Yep. They told us that there was a 4.2 billion headroom on the 31st of October because there were also improved tax revenues. Yep. I don't think 4.2 billion can be characterised as a black hole, but it was a challenging circumstance. That's the truth. Can the Minister consider in all future budgets that such a letter should be made available at the same time that budget publications and OBR publications are made available, which sets out what was said to the Chancellor at what point, so we can then verify whether the press conference on the 4th of November was very wide of the mark and gave a materially misleading view of what actually was happening.
Yeah. Well, I thank the right honourable gentleman for his question, and I would, as will be clear, I would agree with his remarks about Richard Hughes' contribution to public service. I would disagree with him, however, that the premature publication of the forecast last Wednesday was a narrow matter, because I think what the report showed was that it was not simply a single error, but more systemic issues which are highlighted. So I would disagree with his characterisation of that as narrow. He referred to some of the comments that Professor Miles made at the Treasury Committee, and indeed Professor Miles confirmed that the £4 billion headroom, which was identified in the forecast on October 31st, was not inconsistent with the sentiment that this is a very challenging fiscal position. He also asked about the OBR's letter and the nature of its being published and what that speaks about to the future. As I said earlier, Madam Deputy Speaker, the publication of the OBR letter was agreed to by the Chancellor, and this was due to the unique nature of this budget in the context of the OBR's productivity review, as they said themselves, whilst acknowledging that this would not become usual practice due to the importance of preserving a private space for discussion.
Karen Moon.
As Madam Deputy Speaker, the OBR leak was deeply disturbing, particularly in light of international sensitivities. Can the Chief Secretary rule out foreign actors exploiting the OBR's inadequate security at any point?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, the report that the OBR published into this premature publication of their forecast finds no evidence of hostile cyber activity. What it did do was look at the spring forecast and to identify what happened there, and very concerningly identified that there had been premature access of the forecast at that fiscal event also. Now, the report did not look further back, for instance, at the Chancellor's first budget last year, or indeed budgets delivered by Conservative Chancellors under the previous government, and that's why it's so important that we take forward the recommendation, we the government take forward the recommendation of the OBR's report to conduct a forensic examination of potential premature access at previous fiscal events.
Sir Julian Lewis.
Government seemed to be keen to maximise the gravity of the OBR's accidental leak whilst minimising the gravity of the Chancellor's deliberate leaks. And as he has twice frankly admitted not being aware of the case of Labour Chancellor Hugh Dalton, who resigned for inadvertently leaking to a journalist a single sentence of his budget moments before it was due to be announced in 1947, now that he has understood what actually happened then, and that was the paradigm case, does he think it holds any lessons or examples of conduct that the Chancellor ought to consider following?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I came here this morning expecting to be critiqued by the opposition for their view of government policy. I didn't expect a critique of my knowledge of history, but it appears that that's the route that the honourable gentleman wants to take. And indeed, when I gave way to the gentleman sitting to his right yesterday, my right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, said I was being too generous. And I'm inclined to agree with my right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, that I was too generous in giving way to him yesterday. But the broader point that the right honourable gentleman who just asked his question made, I think we need to be really careful, Madam Deputy Speaker, about downplaying the seriousness of the OBR publishing their forecast early. It's not, as the other right honourable gentleman said, a narrow matter. It is not something which we can simply brush away. This is a serious leak of highly sensitive information, and we take it very seriously as a government.
Andrew Lewin.
Deputy Speaker, 3 years ago the role of the OBR came into sharp focus after the delivery of another budget, the budget that became known as the mini-budget, a budget in which the markets were sent spiralling and the Bank of England was forced to take emergency action. Would my right honourable friend agree with me that this last week has been a serious one, but within a week we have taken action, and 3 years on we are still living with the consequences of the decision taken by the party opposite?
Yeah, quite right.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right that people across Britain are still living with the consequences of what the previous government did in that mini-budget where they sidelined the OBR. And in fact, one of the reasons why we're so keen to protect and strengthen the integrity of the OBR is because of the vital role that it plays in our fiscal framework. And one of the very first bill, in fact, passed by this government included the fiscal lock, which now prevents the sidelining of the OBR.
Joshua Reynolds.
Deputy Speaker, in the budget, the Chancellor announced that she would legislate for only one assessment of the fiscal rules instead of two every year, as we have it at the moment. But in light of the change of OBR leadership, will he commit today to seek the views of the incoming chair of the OBR about the economic and fiscal impact of that decision before the government plough ahead with it?
Madam Deputy Speaker, just to be clear in terms of what the OBR is required to do and what the Chancellor announced in the budget last week, the OBR is required to produce two forecasts a year, and the Chancellor will commission a second forecast in due course. As the Chancellor announced the budget, though, that forecast will not include an assessment of the government's performance against the fiscal rules, and the government will not respond with fiscal policy.
Chris Vince.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Minister for his statement. Was he as surprised as I was to find out that such a sensitive document like this was actually being managed by something that was using WordPress? And would he reassure my constituent in Harlow, and what reassurances he had from the OBR, that moving forward these sort of documents will be password protected and, crucially, protected from foreign interference?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. I will admit that I was surprised to read the report from the OBR that it made clear that any assumptions we might have had that this was a simple error actually are not true. It was more systemic issues which were revealed by the OBR's report. And indeed, there was functionality, as I understand it, within the IT and website systems that the OBR had to have greater security, but they were not configured correctly to provide that security. And that really underscores for me this is not one inadvertent error by one official. This is a systemic issue with the information security, which is so important.
Simon Hall.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. While I remain convinced that there are other ways of delivering the guardrails that the Treasury needs without the OBR, I know the Chief Secretary and the Chancellor are not persuaded of that argument, but I wonder if he might be persuaded on this, that the resignation of the chair of the OBR and the new recruitment process underway does present an opportunity for the Treasury and the Permanent Secretary to reflect upon what it needs the OBR to be doing for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years ahead. What skills it needs, what shape it needs to be, what it actually needs to do to get the economy right. Will they be availing themselves of that opportunity to recast the OBR and to reflect on its roles and responsibilities?
Thank you. I thank the right honourable gentleman, and I'm glad that having not had time to accept his intervention yesterday, we are now back to business as usual, where we have frequent exchanges across this chamber. We probably disagree, I think, in terms of the OBR's role, but I hope he would recognise the benefit of one of the changes the Chancellor has already announced about how the OBR will produce what the OBR will do in future, because whilst the OBR, as I said to another honourable gentleman a few moments ago, is required to produce 2 forecasts a year, the Chancellor has announced that forecast will not include an assessment against the fiscal rules in the spring, because the government will not respond with fiscal policy. So that is a change which the Chancellor already announced at budget last week.
Dr. Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I do find it rather curious that the members opposite have a lot to say about Hugh Dalton's budget in 1947, but so little to say about Liz Truss's just in 2022. Selective amnesia, exactly. It is very curious. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, my office, all the staff in my office very diligently followed the advice from the Speaker on cybersecurity around the threat of foreign intervention in our IT, and I think it's right that we do take all this seriously. But I'm not convinced, based on the reports we've seen, that the OBR had taken the same kind of steps to protect its own systems. So, where the OBR and other government departments and agencies offered this advice and just didn't follow it, or is there an oversight here in terms of how we're managing the security right across government?
Good question.
Thank my honourable friend for his question, and he's right to point out that whilst honourable members opposite seem keen to raise points of history, they seem to be rewriting history when it comes to the last few years of their time in office. But my honourable friend asked an important question about cyber security, and indeed the government is going to be working with the National Cyber Security Centre and the OBR to take forward those recommendations in the OBR report about doing a forensic examination of potential premature access at previous fiscal events. I should add, or reiterate rather, for the avoidance of doubt, that the report found no evidence of hostile cyber activity. But I think he's right to point out that information security, cyber security is important for all of us across government, and indeed that was reflected in the spending review.
Sir Ashley Fox.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. For the first time in its history, the OBR was forced to correct the record about the forecasting process in the run-up to the budget. Isn't the reason for this because the Chancellor selectively leaked information from the OBR to mislead the public and to justify tax rises?
Order. I'm sure the honourable gentleman isn't wanting to suggest that the Chancellor in any way misled anyone. Sir Ashley Fox.
That's what he was doing.
I'm grateful for your advice, Madam Deputy Speaker, and perhaps I could rephrase it that the Chancellor inadvertently misled the public to justify those tax rises.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the OBR set out in black and white that the productivity downgrade reduced tax receipts by £16 billion. They identified causes of that productivity downgrade as being the previous government's record in office, whether that is slashing public investment or the mishandling of Brexit. The Chancellor was clear in her speech on November the 4th that this productivity downgrade, combined with the clear need to increase headroom to build resilience in the public finances, would require everyone to make a contribution, and that is what happened at the budget.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to see you in the chair. I was disappointed, as was my constituents, by the botched and premature release of the budget on the OBR website, and I welcome the news that the OBR are welcoming in a cyber expert. I sincerely hope it isn't the Leader of the Opposition who, as we know, has formed with accessing websites a little bit improperly, and after all, the Conservatives really couldn't do without her. But my question really is around the cyber security expert reporting back. When will the government expect to hear back, and can we have the assurance that in the interim the OBR have got their security systems into the shape that it needs to be in?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question, and the government takes this matter very seriously indeed, and we will move urgently to take forward that recommendation of the report, working with the National Cyber Security Centre. And while cyber security is an important matter for the OBR and indeed all government departments and bodies all year round, the forecast is of particular market sensitivity, and it is particularly important to ensure that is kept without being published prematurely. And that's why we take what happened last week and what seems to have happened in spring and what may have even happened at previous fiscal events so very seriously.
Final question, Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for his answers? The OBR assessments have an incredible impact on households and businesses in Northern Ireland and indeed across the whole of the United Kingdom. So can the Minister please outline the steps that are to be taken to ensure full transparency around this resignation and to safeguard trust in the OBR's future work so that public confidence in our economy is not in any way undermined? Thank you.
Well, the honourable gentleman is absolutely right to point out the importance of trust, not just in the economy but also the public finances, and indeed the role of the OBR is, in the government's view, a critical part of that trust. And it is because of that role that the OBR plays in our fiscal framework, robust and transparent fiscal framework, that we take the matter of the premature release of this information so seriously, and why we are following up the matters it raises so urgently.
I thank the Minister for his responses this afternoon. Brings us to the second urgent question. Matt Weston.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. To ask the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancashire if he will make a statement on espionage cases and the Official Secrets Act.
Minister Dan Jarvis.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I thank the honourable member for raising this urgent question following the deeply disappointing collapse of the prosecution case concerning two individuals charged under the Official Secrets Act of 1911. These allegations were hugely concerning, and we recognise and share the public and parliamentary frustration around this outcome. The government welcomed the JCNSS inquiry and the opportunity it provided for parliamentary scrutiny on this important matter, alongside the ongoing review led by the Intelligence and Security Committee. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the Joint Committee on the National Security Strategy, under my honourable friend's chairship, for their diligent and rapid work. The Government will now take the time to consider the Committee's conclusions and recommendations properly, in conjunction with partners referenced in the report, before responding within the 2-month timeframe. However, what I will say today, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that I am glad that the JCNSS report has reinforced two fundamental points which the Government has made throughout. Firstly, and as the Government has been saying for several weeks, the report makes clear that there was no evidence of attempts by any minister, special advisor or senior official to interfere with the prosecution. The JCNSS report states that it found no evidence of improper influence. And despite ongoing questions about a meeting of senior officials that took place on the 1st of September, chaired by the National Security Advisor, the report clarifies that there was no deliberate efforts to obstruct the prosecution. Now, the first Senior Treasury Counsel had already made the judgment on the basis of the evidence that charges could not progress by the 22nd of August, more than a week before the meeting took place. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, we have been consistent throughout on these points, which runs in sharp contrast to our critics, who initially criticised the government for intervening in the case, and then when it became clear that that was nonsense, criticised us for not intervening in the case. Secondly, the JCNSS report reinforces a fundamental point that I have made to this House previously, that the root cause of the failure of this case was the outdated Official Secrets Act of 1911, which of course predated the First World War. The 1911 Act created an unrealistic test by requiring the prosecution to prove that China was an enemy. The Law Commission had previously flagged the term enemy as being deeply problematic as far back as 2017. Now, the Government will continue to work tirelessly to ensure that we have the most effective structures and processes in place to support law enforcement partners in mitigating and prosecuting foreign espionage wherever we find it. More importantly, the ongoing disinformation around the collapse of this case has been distracting from the most important issue that we should be focused on, how the government can work across this House to ensure that Chinese espionage will never be successful in the United Kingdom. As the Prime Minister stated in his speech at the Lady Mayor's banquet on Monday, protecting national security is our first duty. This government will never waver from our efforts to keep the British people safe. That is why, on the 18th of November, I set out a significant number of measures that this government is taking to counter the threat that China and other state actors pose to UK democracy and society. And in line with the JCNSS report, the government will continue to strengthen our processes and preparedness for future threats, ensuring we leverage our new security legislation effectively.
Order. 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 The Minister will know that he should have restricted himself to 3 minutes for his response. That appears to have been 4 1/4. Matt Weston.
I thank the Minister for his comments. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to thank the Speaker for granting this urgent question, demonstrating the importance of parliamentary's security, safety and sovereignty. The case of alleged spying on behalf of China caused widespread concern amongst the public and the members of both houses. My committee, which is comprised of senior members of both houses, examined the timeline, actions and decisions from the government and the Crown Prosecution Service. Whilst this was a highly unusual inquiry for a committee to conduct, it was essential that Parliament examine the processes which led to the collapse of the case. Our inquiry found nothing to suggest a coordinated high-level effort to collapse the prosecution, nor of deliberate efforts to obstruct or circumvent constitutional safeguards. However, we did find a process beset by confusion and misaligned expectations, which at points can best be described as shambolic. There were systemic failures and deficiencies in communications, coordination and decision-making between the Crown Prosecution Service and the government. Indeed, the episode reflects poorly on the otherwise commendable efforts across the public servants to keep our country safe. Given the conclusions I have just set out, will the Minister give reassurances that the government will work with the CPS closely to ensure communications and processes are tightened up, particularly when dealing with cases of national security? Does the Minister acknowledge that the new National Security Act, whilst comprehensive, may not entirely cover low-level espionage activity, especially given the structural parallels with the previous legislation? And does the Minister finally agree that greater support should be given to the Deputy National Security Advisers and civil servants acting as witnesses in cases such as these to ensure top-level grip on cases with significant public exposure?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As Mr Speaker has rightly acknowledged, these issues require a great deal of scrutiny from Parliament, and the Government is absolutely grateful for the opportunity to engage and work closely with Parliament on these matters, not least because they do deserve and merit careful consideration, alongside decisive action by ministers and, of course, decisive action by senior officials as well. Now, the Joint Committee on National Security Strategy, led by the Honourable Member for Warwick and Leamington, plays a vital role in providing that appropriate scrutiny. And I say that not just as a Government Minister, but as a former member of his committee. I would also extend the same principle to the ISC for the important work that they do. And I do want to take this opportunity again to thank the Chair and the whole of the committee for undertaking this work and publishing a comprehensive report as quickly as they have done. Now, the Honourable Member, the Chair, highlights some important aspects of the report's conclusions and the recommendations and the findings of the work that they have undertaken. And as I have said, the Government approaches this issue and will consider the committee's report with the utmost seriousness. Now, I can give him the assurances that he seeks in terms of the Government now very carefully considering the findings of the report. And of course, I give him and the House an absolute assurance that we will respond within the agreed timeframe. He mentioned a couple of other points which I would like to respond to briefly now, but happy to engage with him in more detail should he think that that be necessary. He mentioned the role of the CPS, and he will understand that as a Government Minister I'm incredibly limited in terms of what I can say about the CPS because they are operationally independent of government. But I think he makes a fair challenge, and of course we'll look carefully at the report's findings in this area. He also mentioned the National Security Act, and whilst I am not in any way complacent with regard to that legislation, I do think that we find ourselves in a much stronger position than was the case previously. But of course, We keep these matters under review, and along with colleagues across government, we are constantly seeking to assure ourselves that the legislative framework that is in place is fit for purpose and is appropriate. And I give him an absolute assurance that that is something that we take incredibly seriously. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, he mentioned the Deputy National Security Advisor. Let me take the opportunity again to pay tribute to him for the important work that he does. He is a dedicated public servant, and his contribution to our national security is immense. The government is grateful for his service, as I am sure is the whole House. But I'll look very carefully at the points that the Honourable Member has made, and we will make sure that they are properly reflected in the response he receives from the government.
Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Joint Committee for their work. Their report is a damning indictment of the government's handling of the China spy case. Not only has the investigation found, and I quote, serious systemic failures and deficiencies, it was, as the Honourable Gentleman just said, shambolic. It's found as well, surprise, surprise, that there was enough evidence to prosecute the alleged spies. The committee writes, in our view, it is plain that China posed a range of threats to the United Kingdom's national security. In our view, it is plain that, taken together, these amounted to a more general active threat to the United Kingdom's national security. Madam Deputy Speaker, the party opposite tried to blame the last government for the collapse of the case, but this investigation has exposed that that is plainly untrue. I was surprised to hear the Security Minister refer to the deficiencies of the 1911 Act. I draw his attention to paragraph 40 of the report. I think he probably should have read it before he came to this House. It was this government's incompetence which ultimately led to these two men not standing trial. And most worryingly, this report reminds us that there may be many more such cases. Indeed, why wouldn't there be if foreign spies believe they can act against this House with impunity and effective immunity? It is obvious that this government's not prepared to stand firm. Over the past few days, we've heard from the press, not from reports to this House, that the Prime Minister is about to sign off the mega Chinese embassy in London, despite major security concerns, and that he's preparing to travel to Beijing. Will he, I wonder, have the backbone to stand up for our interests whilst he is there? I will ask the Security Minister three very simple and straightforward questions. First, did the government provide the Joint Committee with the minutes of the 1st of September meeting chaired by the National Security Advisor? The minutes. If not, why not? Second, a number of ministers, during the many debates we've had in this House, appear to have made inaccurate and misleading statements on at least 6 occasions. Will the Minister ensure that corrections are made to Hansard so that the record is straight? And third, given that the Joint Committee has concluded from the evidence it was given that China is a general threat to the United Kingdom's national security, does the government agree? And if it does, how can it justify supporting the mega embassy?
Before I call the Minister, can I make the point to both front benches now that in urgent questions, the Minister has 3 minutes to respond. The opposition front bench should have taken 2 minutes. As an advisory note to the Liberal Democrats, it's 1 minute. And can I commend the Honourable Member for Warwick and Leamington Spa for managing to stay well within his 2 minutes. Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, a few moments ago, I spoke of the careful consideration and appropriate scrutiny with which this matter deserves. And whilst many members of both Houses and members of all parties on the Honourable Gentleman's Committee have adopted such an approach, I have to say that I am disappointed that the Honourable Member opposite continues to choose a different approach. He didn't seem to want to mention that much of the report refers to the time of his party in government. Now, some might have hoped that he would use his contribution today to show a bit of humility, both to the House and to those within our national security community, not least for some of the lowbrow political point scoring and baseless accusations we've heard over the past few weeks. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the aftermath of the trial's collapse, some members opposite accused ministers, special advisers and civil servants of improper interference. This report makes clear that that was baseless and untrue. There were some who suggested that some of our most experienced and most dedicated national security experts set out to deliberately withhold information from prosecutors in order to placate the Chinese government. This report makes clear that that was baseless and untrue. There were some who suggested that their failure to update critical national security legislation was immaterial to the case that was being brought to trial. And this report makes clear that the root cause of the collapse was the years of dither and delay which left outdated, ineffective legislation on the statute book long after we knew that it did not protect our country from the modern threats that we face. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, some members, not all members, some members opposite were all over the place on that legislation and were all over the place with regard to China, and some of them, Madam Deputy Speaker, sadly, still are. Now, as the Prime Minister set out this week, we had the golden age of relations under David Cameron and George Osborne, which then flipped to an ice age that some still advocate. But no matter how much members opposite may wish it to be so, not engaging with China is no option at all. We have been clear that we will cooperate where we can, but always challenge where we must. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, when we say that national security is the first priority of this government, we mean it. And since the trial's collapse, I've announced a comprehensive package which will help us tackle economic, academic, cyber and espionage threats which China presents. The report that the Honourable Member has referred to provides further useful thought on how we can best safeguard our national security, and the Government genuinely welcomes that constructive feedback. And I look forward to engaging with the committee and with responsible members on all sides of the House as we continue how best to continue protecting our democracy and our nation. Now, the Honourable Member opposite did ask me about the minutes of, he's still asking me about the 1st of January meeting, and I'm going to give the Honourable Member the answer. The minutes were provided by the Government to the ISC, so there's his answer. He also, on several occasions, referenced the application for the Chinese embassy. Let me say to him, for the sake of absolute crystal clarity, what the position is with regard to the embassy, and I think that that will be helpful to other members as well. As members will know, an independent planning decision will be made by the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government by the 20th of January. Now, national security is the first duty of government, and it has been our core priority throughout this process. The Home Office and the Foreign Office provided views on the security implications of this bill throughout the process, and we have been clear that a decision should not have been taken until we had confirmed that those considerations had been resolved. The recent letter sent to MHCLG now confirms that all national security issues raised have been addressed. Should the planning decision be approved, the new embassy will replace the 7 different sites which currently comprise China's diplomatic estate in London.
Derek Twig.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think, Madam Speaker, many of us are still somewhat bemused by the fact, despite the 3 witness statements, that somehow the Crown Prosecution Service thought it couldn't go ahead with prosecution. But can I say to my right honourable friend, and I welcome much of what he's said, I think it would be very useful for my honourable friends, the Chair's questions and points before, if he would agree to come back to the committee after the government responds to the committee's recommendations and report, so we could hear sort of a clear timeline for the changes that rightly need to be made.
Well, I'm grateful to him. He will understand that there's nothing more I can add with regard to his first point about the CPS. In terms of his substantive point about engagement with committees of this House, let me give him that assurance. I genuinely welcome the constructive scrutiny, both of the committee that he sits on and of the Honourable Members Committee as well. I think that they provide a huge amount of value, and I give him an absolute assurance of our continued desire to cooperate closely with them.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Lisa Smart.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. The seriousness of the threat Beijing poses to our national security cannot be overstated. Any attempt from China to interfere in our democracy must be rooted out, and the government really should urgently implement the recommendations of the committee's report. The work that the National Security Advisor and his deputy are doing is vital to keeping our country safe, but the report is damning, and it describes aspects of the situation as shambolic. The Minister has previously mentioned his plans for new powers to counter foreign interference, and I'd be grateful if he could provide a timeline for their introduction. While I'm on my feet, Madam Deputy Speaker, I once again urge the Minister to place China on the enhanced tier of furs. And if he won't do that today, I wonder if he might give us a date in the diary, say, a week before the Prime Minister's visit to Beijing, which may well coincide with the date of an announcement on a planning permission for the mega embassy decision, and give the clarity to the House that it deserves.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very grateful to her for her serious attention to these matters. I hope that she would acknowledge that it's only a couple of weeks ago that I brought forward to this House a very significant package of measures designed specifically to counter the threats that we've been debating over a number of months now. And I hope that she would acknowledge that that was a very significant package of measures. But of course, we keep these matters under very close review. I'm certain that the government will want to bring forward further measures in due course. She raised the point about furs. As I've said to the House previously, there were members opposite who didn't think that we would introduce furs on time. We did introduce furs on time. I think it is a valuable tool and adds significant value to our capabilities with regard to our national security. But at the same time, we have to very carefully deliberate the addition of more countries onto the enhanced tier. We keep that under very close review, and I'd be very happy to discuss that matter with her further.
Andy Slaughter.
Very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The committee, of which I'm a member, approached this in a non-partisan way, and I agree with the Minister that it's a pity the opposition has not taken the same approach, particularly as it started on their watch. The strong impression I formed from the inquiry was that everyone thought they were doing the right thing, but in reality they were tiptoeing around the issues and staying in their own silos. Whether the Minister agrees with that analysis or not, what organisational lessons has he learnt that will prevent any repetition of this, in his own words, deeply disappointing outcome?
Well, I'm grateful to him for his contribution today and his work on the committee, and I completely agree the premise of his point that the committee considered these matters in a non-partisan way. And I think that is precisely the right approach. That is the approach that I will always seek to undertake. And I know that the majority of members of this House will proceed in the same way. Now, he raised an entirely fair and reasonable challenge about the organisational lessons that have been learnt as a consequence of this process. I think all ministers in this government and in the previous government should approach these kind of reports with a degree of humility. Undoubtedly, there are lessons that will need to be both identified, learned and implemented as a consequence of recent events. As I know he would expect, as would the House, I think the government needs to do that in a measured and considered way, and that is why I give him and his committee an absolute assurance that we will look at the detail of his report very closely indeed, and we will respond within the time frame that they have set us.
Julian Lewis.
Having previously read out the relevant section of the 1911 Official Secrets Act in this chamber, I am pleased that the report concludes that the decision not to prosecute under its terms flies in the face of common sense. What also flies in the case of common sense is the government's previous position that China poses a range of serious threats but does not constitute a threat itself. Is that still the government's position?
Well, The right honourable gentleman knows that I always listen assiduously to what he has to say, given the experience that he brings to this House. He will, I am certain, have looked very carefully at what the Prime Minister said in his Mansion House speech on Monday evening. But on the off chance that he hasn't yet had the opportunity to do that, let me tell him and the House the essence of what the Prime Minister said with regard to China, because he very clearly set out the government's approach. He said that China poses real national security threats to the United Kingdom, but it's time for a serious approach to reject the simplistic binary choice, neither golden age nor ice age. So our response will not be driven by fear nor softened by illusion. It will be grounded in strength, clarity and sober realism. I agree with the Prime Minister, and I suspect most sensible members of this House do as well.
Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I commend my honourable friend, the member for Warwick and Leamington, for steering this through his committee swiftly, sensitively and managing sensitive data. A great example of how the Select Committee corridor can really contribute to transparency for the public. And I look forward to the government's response on this. On that point, though, there are areas of sensitive matters that are not covered by the existing scrutiny committees of this House. And I hope that the Minister would, on the basis of this example, be an advocate in government for the establishment of a new committee that can cover the sensitive matters that are not currently able to have oversight because of their sensitivity.
Good point. Yeah.
Well, I'm grateful to her, and I completely agree with her assessment of the work that the committee has done. She's right. It is a great example of the work of a select committee that has constructively contributed a very significant amount of useful information that the government will now consider in great detail. Her second point about the creation of another select committee, I think she will understand if I say that that is above my pay grade. I would sort of gently point to the fact that the government wants to have a very good, close and constructive relationship with the ISC, and that might provide, it'll be for the ISC to take a view, but that may provide a forum for further parliamentary scrutiny on those matters.
Mark Pritchard.
Madam Deputy Speaker, whilst I have huge respect for the Security Minister and indeed the Honourable Member for Warrington and Leamington and his committee, and I sat on that joint committee for National Security Strategy for 5 years, is it not the case that this statement actually raises more questions, that it is not a case of case closed, but there are questions that are still outstanding, and that is because inherent the weakness here is that the joint committee does not have access to classified material. Only the Intelligence and Security Committee does. Again, I sat on that committee. So having sat on both committees, there is a stark contrast between the types of witnesses that can be called and what the witnesses can actually say. So therefore, would the Minister now commit, given the earlier question, to review the memorandum of understanding between the Intelligence and Security Committee to ensure that the right questions can be asked of the right committee at the right time so that we can actually have some definitive conclusions on this whole saga?
I'm grateful to him for the experience that he brings to this House, not least in terms of having sat on both of the committees that we've just been referring to. I'd, if you'll forgive me, slightly take issue with his assessment of what the report does, because the government is very clear that the report emphasises the key arguments that the government have been bringing forward over the last couple of weeks. In terms of his second point, around the MOU. He's raised that previously. I think it's an entirely reasonable point for him to raise, both publicly and privately. Let me take it away, and I will come back to him.
Tulip Siddiq.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Security Minister knows very well the case of my constituent, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, who is accused of espionage by the Iranian state. In case the Minister needs a reminder, her horrifying ordeal is being dramatised on BBC iPlayer at the moment. And the one thing Nazanin has said to me constantly is that a hostage envoy would have really helped when dealing with her situation. I know this is dealing with espionage cases from the other side, but for the sake of national security, has the Minister considered a hostage envoy, which is what the Ratcliffe family keep raising with me?
Well, I'm grateful to her for the contribution that she's made and the work that she's done previously. I'm joined on the Treasury bench by a Foreign Office Minister who listened very carefully to the Honourable Lady's comments and has indicated that he'd be very happy to discuss them further with her.
Speaker, can I thank the Minister for his response and the way he's responding to this? I know he'll be as concerned as the rest of us around descriptions of this being the process being shambolic and the criticisms of systematic failures. Can the Minister tell us what's changed? And secondly, what's changed over the past almost 4 years? Because Russia's invasion of Ukraine changed the world profoundly and China continues to provide assistance to Russia.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think that is an entirely fair and reasonable question. So I can give him a very straight response. One of the things that has changed is that the Prime Minister, rightly in my view, conducted a machinery of government change in September, which means that the Security Minister now sits not just in the Home Office, as was the case previously, but I also now sit in the Cabinet Office. And the purpose of that machinery of government change is to ensure that we can more effectively coordinate national security policy and activity across government. It's relatively early days, but my analysis today is that that was the right move to make, and I think will enable government to make better, more informed, timely decisions in this area. But at the same time, I approach these things with a degree of humility. We will look very carefully at the findings of the report and make sure that we consider them and we look at what changes are necessary and will respond to the committee and to this House in due course.
Dr Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I do thank the Minister for his response today. I think throughout this affair he's remained calm and consistent in how he's answered what, let's be honest, have been smears at times from the benches opposite. And I think the report from the Joint Committee has found them out, and that's why their benches are empty today. I think the members opposite, rather than hiding, they should be in here apologising. Absolutely. But does the Minister welcome that the report makes clear that the root cause of the case collapsing was a dithering and delay from the previous government? And does he agree with the Prime Minister when he says that this is nothing short of a dereliction of duty when it comes to our national security? Thank you.
Well, I'm grateful to him for his contribution today and on many previous occasions. I mean, the essence of the point that he makes, I think, is absolutely right. I do regret the tone of some of these debates in recent weeks. I think some of it has been entirely unnecessary when what we should have been doing is coming together as a House to look at what we can do together to ensure that the activity that we had allegedly seen here isn't able to happen again. That has always been my approach throughout, and it will continue to be my approach as we move forward. The points he made about the recommendations within the report are absolutely right, and I think it vindicates the basic argument that the government has sought to brought forward. But I say that with humility because we will want to look carefully at the detail of all of the findings and all of the recommendations. We will do that over the next number of weeks and we will take on board lessons where they need to be learnt.
James Wild.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The report says that the National Security Advisor, Jonathan Powell, apparently had very limited engagement about the case. In contrast, one of his predecessors, Sir Stephen Lovegrove, who I worked with in the Ministry of Defence, said he would have expected to be involved intimately in the provision of government evidence. Why was Jonathan Powell, and Lord Hermer for that matter, who's described as being not proactive in the report, so passive on a matter of national security and alleged spying on members of this House?
I honestly don't believe that that is a fair and reasonable characterisation of the role played by the National Security Advisor. The National Security Advisor is an extremely experienced and dedicated public servant who is dedicating his life to keeping our country safe. The Honourable Member, because he's a very well-informed and assured member of this House, will understand that there were specific restrictions placed on the Deputy National Security Advisor about what he could do and what he could say. Both the Deputy National Security Advisor and the National Security Advisor acted with integrity throughout this process, and I know that this House will be grateful to them for it.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. In light of the important issues being discussed today on the concerning activities of China in the UK, Can I ask the Minister what additional steps he is taking or planning to take to protect Hong Kongers, Tibetans and Uyghurs from any form of transnational repression?
Well, I know that the Honourable Member takes a very close interest in this. I hope that he will have seen the very significant package of measures that the Government brought forward a couple of weeks ago. We take issues relating to transnational repression incredibly seriously. We welcome the report from another select committee of this House, which we've responded to. And through the Defending Democracy Task Force, we've conducted a review of transnational repression in our country. So I hope he sees that we take these matters very seriously. The notion that any state, whether it be China or anyone else, would seek to harm or to persecute anybody resident in the United Kingdom is totally unacceptable, and the Government has been consistent in making that point.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This report by the Joint Committee on National Security is not only damning, it refers to systemic failures, shambolic communications being inadequate. But I'm struck by paragraphs 41 to 45, which calls into judgment calls into question the judgment of the Director of Public Prosecutions. The former independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, Lord Carlisle, described the decision not to proceed as inexplicable. And I think the committee itself, in paragraph 45, is gentle in saying that it's surprised by the decision not to proceed. So the question has to be asked, does the Government still have confidence in the Director of Public Prosecutions?
Well, he will understand that as a Government Minister, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to make commentary about the performance of the Director of Public Prosecutions. The CPS, the DPP, are operationally independent of Government. But he will have heard me say that we approach these matters with a degree of humility, and that is the right approach. I would just gently say to the Honourable Member that he might also want to approach these matters with a degree of humility, given recent events in his own party.
Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister and I have clashed over Sun Tzu in the past, and the risk of riling him up again. Sun Tzu said that sometimes a strategic advantage is to be had by feigning weakness. Is it not the case that every day we fail to add China to the enhanced tier of the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme? It's not us feigning weakness, it is weakness.
Yep. Very good.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, as Christmas approaches, I hope that perhaps there might be an opportunity for a cup of coffee with the Honourable Gentleman, and we can compare our various quotes. And I give him an assurance that I never had any concern about him seeking to quote Sun Tzu. I think my concern was that I think it's possible to find a quote from him that basically matches any particular argument that you want to progress. But his substantive point was about furs, and he will have heard what I've said today and previously. The Government is looking very closely at whether there should be additional countries added onto the enhanced tier. But when a decision is made with regard to that, we will bring that forward in the usual way.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much, first of all, for his careful and helpful answers to the questions. Given the collapse of the recent espionage case and the findings that failures in procedure and coordination undermine the prosecution, what specific actions will the Government now take to restore confidence in parliamentary security and ensure alleged spy threats are fully investigated to pursue the course of justice so that something similar does not ever happen again? Thank you very much.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful to him, as I always am. He made an important point about parliamentary security, and I hope, as a very dedicated parliamentarian, he will know that the Government takes these matters incredibly seriously. That's why we're working very closely with Mr. Speaker and with this House through the Defending Democracy Task Force to make sure that we have the appropriate mitigations in place to counter the nature of the threat that we face. I think it's also, because I hold the Honourable Gentleman in very high regard, just referring to what the Prime Minister said on Monday, because the Prime Minister made, I think, an important point that is highly relevant to the question that he has raised, which is to say that protecting our security, and I know that he will agree with this, is non-negotiable. It is our first duty, but by taking tough steps to keep us secure, we enable ourselves to cooperate in other areas. I hope that he agrees with that.
Final question, Jim Allister.
Today again,
the Minister has said that the reason this case collapsed was the inadequacy of the 1911 Act, which raises the obvious question: how come these two gentlemen were ever charged in the first place? Because the evidential test at the moment they were charged is exactly the same as the evidential test when the case was dropped. So how did they come to be charged under this Act if it was inadequate? Isn't it quite clear the Act was more than adequate to charge them and more than adequate to convict them?
Well, I'm not sure that anybody really thinks that the 1911 Act was appropriate. And as he will know, because it's a statement of obvious truth, the decision to proceed was taken not under this government, but under the previous one. All I'm able to do to this House is to account for the decisions taken and the actions taken by this government. And what this government will always do is ensure that we protect our national security. It is our first duty, and nothing matters more.
Can I thank the Security Minister for his answers this afternoon? I will allow a few moments for the front benches to swap over. To the next business this afternoon, urgent question, Callum Miller.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. To ask the Secretary of State for Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Affairs to make a statement on imminent US military strikes on land targets in Venezuela and the implications for UK foreign policy.
Madam Deputy Speaker, as my honourable friend, the Minister for North America, said to the House yesterday, questions of US military action in the Caribbean and Pacific are questions for the US. The UK has not been involved in US strikes in the Caribbean. The Foreign Office currently advises against all but essential travel to Venezuela due to ongoing crime and instability. As always, our travel advice remains under regular review to ensure it reflects our latest assessments of risks to British nationals. The UK stands with Venezuelan people in their pursuit of a fair, democratic and prosperous future. Nicolas Maduro's claim to power is fraudulent. The UK continues to call on the Venezuelan authorities to publish the results of the 2024 presidential election in full. This government announced sanctions against 15 more members of Maduro's regime in January. The UK will continue to work with our international partners to achieve a peaceful negotiated transition in Venezuela, which ensures that the will of all Venezuelans is respected.
Callum Miller.
I'm grateful that this urgent question was granted, Madam Deputy Speaker, and to the Minister for that answer. At oral questions yesterday, the Foreign Secretary and the Minister for the Americas both stated that UK was committed to upholding international law. Last night, Donald Trump announced that US military strikes against Venezuelan land targets would, and I quote, start very soon. Does the Minister believe that such an action would be legal? Over recent weeks, the US has acted with complete impunity in the Caribbean, conducting unilateral military strikes in international waters with no due process. Let me be very clear. President Maduro is a threat to democracy and civil liberty. He is an ally only to dictators like Vladimir Putin and President Xi. Yet the UK's response to the culture of impunity in the Oval Office must be robust and consistent. We must always hold those who breach international law accountable, and by failing to, we risk normalising abuses which are eroding the international liberal order, all to the benefit of strong men like Maduro who reject entirely the rule of law. So I have several questions for the Minister. Have US strikes in the Caribbean already violated international law? What steps is the government taking, including on halting intelligence sharing, to ensure the UK cannot be complicit in other US violations? Has the UK been complicit in illegal actions already taken by the US, including the alleged double-tap operations authorised by War Secretary Hegseth? And does the Minister believe that War Secretary Hegseth has authorised the commitment of war crimes? Finally, can the Minister confirm what further steps the government is taking to sanction Maduro and his associates and to work with international allies to strengthen our collective diplomatic and economic pressure on his regime?
Madam Deputy Speaker, as this House will understand, we must be very careful on making assessments. We, of course, continue to stand by international law. I'm not in a position to provide a detailed assessment of the strikes conducted by the US, which are clearly a matter for them as the Foreign Secretary and indeed the Minister for North America said during orals yesterday. The Liberal Democrat spokesperson asks whether we were involved in the strikes. I confirm again, as we confirmed yesterday, that we were not. He will understand that I won't comment on intelligence matters from the dispatch box, and he asks about our policy towards Venezuela. It remains, as I set out, we do not accept the legitimacy of the current administration put in place by Nicolas Maduro, but we do maintain limited engagement with Venezuelan officials where necessary.
Speaker, this is an enormous US military build-up under Trump, one of the largest in decades. Retired US generals, along with US politicians, including Republicans, are warning that Trump's strikes off the coast of Venezuela are already violating international law. Yesterday, the government told me that no British troops are aboard the US warships near oil-rich Venezuela, despite reports to the contrary. But what is the government doing to try to stop Trump from taking this dangerous escalatory path, which he now says could include land strikes?
As the Minister for North America was clear to my honourable friend yesterday, the UK is not involved in these operations. There have been, as my honourable friend mentions, there's been much reporting and speculation in the US media and indeed in the US Congress, and I think it's appropriate for me to comment on the deliberations of their House on these questions.
Shadow Minister Wendy Morton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful to the Honourable Member for Bicester and Woodstock for securing this urgent question. Venezuela may be 1,000 miles away, but instability there has a direct impact on the safety and prosperity of the British people here. The restoration of democratic institutions is essential if Venezuela is to escape the political, economic and humanitarian crises imposed on its people by Nicolas Maduro's authoritarian regime. The Maduro regime is propped up by the same axes of authoritarian states that undermine the rules-based international order and foster instability around the world. We know the shocking level of smuggling that comes out of Venezuela, and at a moment when our allies appear to be taking quite decisive action, the world is watching how Britain responds. So I'd like to ask the Minister, what discussions are taking place with President Trump's administration about the objectives and scope of any imminent US military action, and what would be the implications for the wider UK-US defence partnership, particularly our joint counter-narcotics operations. The House will also expect clarity on how the government intends to hold the Maduro regime to account, what further diplomatic pressure, targeted sanctions and coordinated international action is the UK pursuing to support Venezuelans fighting for a peaceful democratic transition. Can the Minister also update the House on the government's position regarding Venezuela's provocation and aggression towards Guyana, the risks of escalation and the steps being taken with CARICOM partners? And finally, given the scale of organised crime linked to the regime, what additional measures are being deployed to disrupt drug flows, money laundering and criminal networks that threaten communities here in the UK? Are Interpol and our intelligence partnerships being fully leveraged? Britain cannot afford to be a bystander. The government must demonstrate clarity, conviction and leadership at this crucial moment. Thank you.
I thank the Honourable Lady for the important questions. The US is, of course, the UK's principal defence and security partner. We have extensive discussions with them on a wide range of shared security objectives, including, of course, counter-narcotics. We're committed to fighting the scourge of drugs and organised crime, including with our partners in Latin America and the Caribbean. And we are, of course, continuing to work with our international partners to achieve a peaceful, negotiated transition in Venezuela, which ensures that the will of all Venezuelans is respected.
Dr. Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. One of my guilty secrets is I like to listen to CNN in the evening. So I do know that people in the States are divided on this issue. Some may call it fake news, of course, yeah. But I'd be interested to know if, the Minister started by talking about sanctions. Have we assessed the impact of these sanctions on Venezuela? And what efforts are we making with civil society there to protect human rights? And I really respect the fact that we're not engaging with the way in which the United States is trying to deal with the drug trade there. But are we able to show leadership in the region by trying to restrict the drugs trade in a way that definitely fits with international law? And when did he last speak to his counterpart in the States in an effort to reach a peaceful solution on this issue?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On my honourable friend's last question, I understand that the Foreign Secretary has been in discussions with her US counterparts in recent days on these questions. He asks an important question about civil society. We strongly condemn the ongoing repression against civil society and members of the opposition in Venezuela, and we continue to call for the unconditional release of those arbitrarily detained, including members of civil society and independent media, such as through the UK published statement to the Human Rights Council in its most recent session.
Sir Julian Lewis.
President Trump would no doubt argue that there's a parallel between this situation and George Bush Sr.'s invasion of Panama in late 1989. But does the Minister agree with me that it will be interesting to see what sort of outcry there is if something like this goes ahead from either Russia or China? And if there isn't, would that not suggest that there's some sort of understanding between these three major powers that they each leave each other to get on with, shall we say, unilateral actions within what they regard as their own spheres of influence?
The honourable gentleman is learned and offers the opportunity both to make historical comparisons and comment on the conduct of other powers. I'll avoid the temptation on both. Clearly, the British position is international law is vital, counter-narcotics action is important, and we support both.
James McCleary.
Nicolas Maduro's presidency clearly has no legitimacy after he was so roundly defeated in last year's elections and has continued to refuse to release any evidence to show that he was victorious as he claims. However, does the Minister agree with me that the presidency of Venezuela is a decision for the Venezuelan people to make in a peaceful, democratic way supported by the international community, not a decision for the US President to make under threat of military force?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for providing an opportunity to provide slightly fuller commentary. The UK is clear. The outcome of the 2024 presidential elections in Venezuela was neither free nor fair, and therefore Nicolas Maduro's claim to power is fraudulent. The National Electoral Council of Venezuela has not yet published the results of the elections. However, results published by the opposition appear to show Edmundo Gonzalez securing the most votes in the presidential election by a significant margin. Clearly, proper process and a free and fair election is the way to determine the leadership in Venezuela.
Andrew Murison.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On data sharing with our allies, does the Minister agree that both SIGINT and HUMINT isn't pick and mix when it comes to the Five Eyes community? And will he assure the House that we will continue to provide the information that the US needs in order to deal with Venezuelan cocaine, most of which lands up in Europe? And I need not remind the Minister that deaths in this country were up by a third in 2022, 2023. And will he ensure that we do not apply an overly loyally approach in our dealings with an ally that is doing its best to tackle the scourge of drugs in the US and in the rest of Europe, in particular on the streets of Britain?
Minister.
I thank the honourable gentleman, my predecessor, for the question. We stand by the principles of international law. I won't provide a detailed commentary, obviously, on intelligence matters, but I will say that the Five Eyes remains a vital, vibrant and free-flowing intelligence sharing arrangement which allows us to tackle a range of threats, including the illegal drug trade, which is having such an impact, obviously, in America, but here too in the UK, and I see it in my own constituency, as I know many others will across the House.
Stephen Gethins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Nicolas Maduro is no respecter of the international rules-based system, but we must be we don't want to see chaos in Latin America, but we're seeing the biggest military build-up in the Caribbean since the Cuban Missile Crisis, the biggest US military build-up since the war in Iraq. What lessons would the Minister draw from previous regime change that the UK government had been involved, and what advice would he give to his US counterparts?
Again, Madam Deputy Speaker, tempting to indulge in some historical analysis, but mostly the advice that we give to our friends and allies, we would do so privately. Clearly, it is important that the rights of Venezuelans to free and fair elections are respected in the way that I outlined in the previous answer to the Liberal Democrats.
Mark Pritchard.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There's a bit of a history lesson today, so let me continue if I may. Of course, President Reagan had his famous wobble over the Falkland Islands, and I think eventually came to the right decision supporting the UK at that time. But of course, how we liaise with the United States as their closest ally, certainly in our eyes, we're their closest ally, whether it's the other way around, let's wait and see. But it could be Venezuela today, it could be Cuba tomorrow, it could be Haiti, and so on and so forth. So I think we need to be candid with the United States. We need to uphold international law, and we need to encourage our cousins across the water to show restraint while recognising the need for them to counter the very, very bad drugs trade that's going into the United States and affecting crime in the streets in many, many cities there. But of course, the three impacts potentially out of this is one, the growing malign influence already in the region of both China and Russia, and how this might impact the proximity to Commonwealth countries such as Trinidad and Tobago or Guyana. So there are unintended consequences of something that the United States might feel is completely legitimate. And of course, finally, is the issue of, does it legitimise Putin's actions in Ukraine?
Madam Secretary, I'm grateful for the experience the Honourable Member brings to these questions. I want to be absolutely clear about the preeminent role of international law and how important that is to this government, and that the actions that we take, and those are of course points that we make to our allies as well.
Edward Morello.
Mr. Speaker, I would just say to the Honourable Member for New Forest East, I suspect he grants President Trump far too much credit in understanding the Monroe Doctrine, but that's an aside. To the Minister, what legal advice has the government received or obtained in regard to the legality or possible legal implications of support for the US, albeit through intelligence sharing for any potential strikes on Venezuela?
Madam Deputy Speaker, as the House will know, ministers receive legal advice on a range of matters relating to foreign policy, and that advice is subject to legal professional privilege.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I compliment the member for Bicester and Woodstock on getting this urgent question today. Could the Minister be very clear? What the US is doing is illegal in bombing vessels at sea, in both international waters and potentially in territorial waters. The harassment of Trinidadian fishing communities likewise, and the now threat of bombardment on the Venezuelan mainland is completely illegal within all sections of international law. Has the British government made any representations to the US on this? And what role did the British government play at the United Nations in the discussions about this? And does he accept this is an incredibly dangerous, massive build-up of military force in the Caribbean that can only be dangerous not just to the people of Venezuela, but the people of every other country and island within the region? Surely there should be some move towards peace rather than allowing this military confrontation to develop.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and the Right Honourable Gentleman brings considerable experience of Latin American issues to this House. On the legal position, I don't think I have very much more to add. Clearly, there has been extensive reporting over the last few days of some specific US strikes. I want to reiterate to the Right Honourable Gentleman that they were not strikes in which the UK had any role, so we're not in a position to provide the fuller explanation that we would had we been involved, which we were not. And on his wider question about his views about build-up in the region, I think the House has heard them.
Martin Wrigley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Minister for his answers so far. Can I just reiterate on the legality of the US bombing ships that are simply accused of carrying drugs? And is the Minister willing to actually say whether he thinks that is legal or not legal in international waters?
I want to be absolutely clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, the UK government stands behind international law in relation both to the law of the sea and international humanitarian law. In every forum, that is what we will stand for. I'm not in a position to make assessments on individual strikes for the reasons that I've set out, but I want to once again underline our position in relation both to IHL and the law of the sea.
Final question, Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for his careful and thoughtful answers on an issue that concerns us greatly. Given the widespread concern about the potential for civilian casualties from these strikes near Venezuela, what assessment has been made to ensure that UK cooperation in the region does not in any way contribute to harm to civilians and remains fully consistent with our human rights obligations? Thank you.
As ever, Madam Deputy Speaker, the honourable gentleman asks an important question in a courteous way. The prospects for the people of Venezuela must be at the heart of our deliberations. As I say, we have been engaged with civil society, where necessary, the Venezuelan government themselves, and we will continue to keep the human rights of the people of Venezuela in our hearts.
Can I thank the Minister for his responses this afternoon? I'll just allow the front bench to swap over. Ten-minute rule motion, Yasmin Qureshi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to make provision about the maximum noise level of fireworks which may be sold to the public, to require that the specified information about noise level is included on labelling and in the sales information for fireworks, to require the Secretary of State to review the impact of firework noises on the welfare of veterans, neurodivergent people, people with certain medical conditions, and animals. Also, to provide local authorities with powers to regulate the use of fireworks in certain circumstances and to enforce such regulation and for connected purposes. Madam Deputy Speaker, fireworks bring joy to many people, and they are an important part of celebrations. But every year, I hear same concerns from residents about the impact of loud, unpredictable fireworks going off late at night. They're not talking about organised displays. They mean sudden explosions in residential streets at 11 o'clock, midnight or later. These bangs start with children, frighten older people, distress pets and livestock, and overwhelm people with managing health conditions or traumas. The same group feels that the most: children with sensory needs, older residents living alone, people with anxiety or heart conditions, and animals as well. At the moment, there's very little anyone can do about it. Council received the complaints, but have no power to act. The police understandably focus on more urgent priorities, and fireworks are often sold without clear information on how loud they are. This bill hopes to close those gaps in a very simple, fair and proportionate way. Madam Deputy Speaker, the public is ahead of us on this. Polling shows that 85% of people want stronger rules on fireworks. Almost half want private backyard displays banned, and a further third want tighter restrictions. This is not a new concern. Over the years, Parliament's petition system has received hundreds of thousands of signatures calling for an action. Talking about family cases, one family told me that their autistic son becomes extremely distressed by unexpected fireworks. He screams, hides, and cannot settle for hours. They want him to enjoy celebrations like any other child, but these unpredictable late-night fireworks make evenings frightening rather than joyful. Another constituent, a lady who, in her 70s who lives alone, said loud fireworks at night make her feel as if she's in a war zone. She asked, quite reasonably, why can't we do something about the loud ones? Research shows what we and the residents want to, which is the problem is not the organised displays, because people can prepare for those. The problem is the unpredictable fireworks set off in neighbourhoods. The impact on veterans is also well documented. The BBC reported Pete White, an RAF veteran with PTSD. He said sudden loud fireworks triggered panic attacks and took him straight back to the sounds of conflict. He described it as uncontrolled sense of terror. Organised displays with clear timings help him prepare, but unexpected fireworks make life difficult for him. And at one point, his anxiety became so severe, he struggled for weeks. Combat Stress reports 25% increase in calls at this time of the year. They want a review of current rules, clear safety information, and limits on fireworks can be used and sold. Hope for Heroes and Combat Stress also found that 74% of veterans want stricter rules, and 67% want fewer days of sale. The impact on animals is significant as well. Since 2010, there have been over 1,000 recorded incidents involving horses during fireworks season, including tragic fatalities. Many owners receive no notice before displays and can't protect their animals in time. Farm animals are also affected. Stress can cause ewes to abort during lambing and separate the mothers from their young. Wildlife suffers as well, because studies have shown there's a sharp increase in heart rate among birds and disruption to roosting. This distress is real and is avoidable. Fireworks also have a public health impact. Air pollution can rise several times higher than normal when fireworks are widely used, especially on still winter nights. People with asthma, COPD, and other respiratory conditions are particularly affected. Health professionals have raised concerns about the pressures this places on vulnerable groups in our NHS. What the bill proposes to do is 5 things. Firstly, a maximum noise limit. Some fireworks reach 120 decibels. That is far louder than necessary for home use. Research shows that reducing it down to 90 to 97 is achievable and is supported by health and welfare experts. This bill sets a reasonable maximum noise level for fireworks sold to the public. Louder fireworks will still be available for licensed displays where there is a notice and supervision. Most fireworks at the moment provide little information about how loud they are. This bill will require clear labelling so people know what they are buying. It also supports councils and trading standard teams when responding to complaints. The councils say current rules are almost impossible to enforce. Fireworks are transient nuisance and gone by the time anyone arrives. But this bill will give the council the ability to introduce targeted, time-limited rules in areas with repeated problems. It's not a blanket ban. It builds on tools councils already use for noise and antisocial behaviour. It lets the councils respond directly to their communities. At the moment, civil enforcement rules rely on the police. This is unrealistic, ineffective and counterproductive. This bill will give the councils the powers to issue civil penalties, similar to how they deal with littering, fly tipping and environmental noise. It is practical, proportionate and fair. The bill also requires the Secretary of State to review the impact of firework noise on veterans, neurodivergent people, people with certain medical conditions and animals. This ensures future policies based on proper evidence. Colleagues have brought forward important proposals before. My honourable friend, the member for Bedford South, one of the deputy speakers, has focused on noise limits. My honourable friend, the member for Luton North, has focused on sales and licensing. This bill is a bit different. It focuses on community impact, late-night misuse, unpredictability, and, more importantly, council powers. These approaches complement each other and this bill fills the missing part. In conclusion, I'm not a party pooper. I don't want to ban fireworks. I want the celebrations to continue. But what we are against is the loudest fireworks used safely and predictably and with respect for neighbours. They want their families, pets and vulnerable neighbours to feel safe in their homes. They want the council to have the ability to act, and they want fireworks sold responsibly and clearly labelled. This bill offers a balanced, practical and a way forward. I commend it to the House.
The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Jim McMahon, Sarah Champion, Debbie Abrahams, Liz Saville-Roberts, Emma Lavelle-Buck, Jamie Stone, Nadia Whitmore, Tan Dessy, Chris Law, Imran Hussain, Alex Sobel and myself, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Yasmin Qureshi.
Fireworks, noise control, etc. Bill.
Second reading what day?
26th of January 2026.
26th of January 2026. The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Pension Schemes Bill, as amended in the Public Bill Committee, to be considered.
Now.
We will begin with new clause 30, with which it will be convenient to consider other new clauses and amendments as listed on the selection paper. I call the Minister to move new clause 30.
Move formally. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I start by thanking all honourable members for their valuable contributions during the passage of the bill to date. In particular, members of the Public Bill Committee who offered line-by-line scrutiny. They have challenged the government but always done so constructively, including the Shadow Economic Secretary, the member for Wyre Forest, who is not with us today. And I think that reflects what is a broad consensus across this House that the Pension Schemes Bill is an important piece of legislation, and it is a consensus that I am very grateful for. The same consensus